Welcome to the Rig Doctor podcast, where I'm giving out remedies to soothe your ailing tone and fix your sick pedal boards. I'm your host, Mason Marangella, aka the Rig Doctor. I've been building rigs for over a decade for many of the industry's top pros, and now I'm giving away all my secrets to DIYers just like you. I'm giving away all my tricks, tips, resources, easy hacks, all the stuff that I've learned over the years so you too can build a pedal board just like a pro. In today's episode, with that in mind, I'm bringing in my good buddy, Dory Lobel. Now, Dory is somebody that I met actually through my buddy, Justin Derrico. Both of them went to MI together, and they both claim that each of the other person was the best player at MI. So, in other words, Dory said that Justin was the best. Justin says that Dory was the best. Who knows who was actually the best? But it's great to have guys that have camaraderie like that. They both are making their living playing guitar, playing on really huge shows. Dory and Justin have both been playing on The Voice. He's also been playing in Jay Leno's band. He's also done stuff with Tori Kelly. He's done stuff with Backstreet Boys, Colby Calais, Casey Musgraves, Nelly, Enrique Iglesias. He's really worn a ton of hats, and we get to get into a lot of the different touring, a lot of the different things that he's done over the course of his career, being in LA, moving from Israel, lots of great stuff here. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really also enjoyed a lot of the gear recommendations. Dory talks about some of his favorite guitars and pieces of gear, and I always love to hear from musicians that are actually making it in the world of music and what it is that they're using as their kind of, their weapons of choice. So Dory really gets into that. We have some fun talking. It's a long conversation, but I think you're going to enjoy every minute of it. And Dory is such a pro, such a great guitar player, such a nice guy. It was really, really fun to get to hear from him, get his take on things. But before I bring you Dory, just want to quickly mention that if you want to support the podcast, you can do so very easily and for free by just sharing this on social media or subscribing to our podcast or just following us on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. All those things are helpful and all free to do. You can also support us financially by buying one of our products, the Vertex Effects products, from an authorized dealer or from us on the Vertex Effects website, or any of the pedal board products that we make through the rigdr.com. Things like pedal boards, pedal board surfaces, risers, dual lock, Velcro, tie-down mount, zip ties, all the pedal board accessories that you would need, in addition to custom-made cables, not only instrument cables, but patch cables for your pedal board. It's all there on the rigdr.com. Also, we offer membership services on the rigdr.com and on Patreon, where the levels pretty much mirror each other, as low as $4.99 a month. And you get access to exclusive deals and discounts, early releases to new products, and of course, a weekly Q&A with me, Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor, where we have our own private Q&A after our kind of public Q&A that we do every week. So you get to have exclusive access to that as well. And if you can't afford any of the membership levels, we also offer a free version of the account. No questions asked. Just send us an email, info@therigdr.com, and we grant 100% of those free requests. And it gives you all the rights and privileges of the basic membership. No questions asked. It's all anonymous. Nobody knows who has a free account and who doesn't. So please feel free to email us there. We don't want anything to be standing between you and great tone, certainly not money. So definitely send us an email. Don't be bashful. We're happy to have you as a part of the community. I also want to thank our sponsors, Blue Microphones, Diodario, True Tone, and our own company, Vertex Effects, for making this podcast possible. Thank you to all those sponsors. Without further delay, I bring you Dory Lobel. All right. We are live with Dory Lobel. Dory, thank you for agreeing to come on with me. I don't see a lot of content of you being interviewed, so I'm happy that you chose me as one of the few that you were willing to speak to about the safety of equipment and gear and your career and all that.
It's funny. This is actually my first podcast interview ever, and probably my first thing of this kind. I'm happy it's with you. I'm a big fan of all your products. Even though we'll get to that, I don't own any, but all my friends use your stuff like crazy. So I'm very familiar. And you and I met a few times and geeked out.
Yeah.
Corey Wong's show. But it's funny. I don't do a lot of interviews, not because I'm actually also, I'm friends, with a lot of the guitar magazine editors and different podcasts that I love, that it's just a matter of time for me to do it. And the reason I haven't done it, it's not because I don't want to do it. It's because I always joke because I'm a giant consumer of podcasts. I'm one of those guitar geeks where you think I wouldn't be a professional because professional people are too cool for that stuff, but I'm still, and Justin actually is the same way. I'm even worse than him. Justin Derrico was one of my best friends. We'll get to that. But a lot of professionals are still guitar geeks. I still love that stuff. And I listen to No Guitar is Safe. Jude Gold is just a brilliant guy, the most positive. We actually just started communicating. And, but the reason I haven't done a lot of these things is, we'll get to that later if we talk about kind of a career trajectory, is I don't want to do it based just on the fact that I've been doing the voice and all the session stuff, even though that's very cool, but I've had on the back burner a few solo projects and band projects, and I don't want to miss out on, once I kind of insert myself into that space, I don't want to miss momentum. I want to have people, something to turn people onto. And the reason I'm doing this actually is because I'm happy that you persisted. And even though I still don't really have stuff on my YouTube channel stuff, maybe this will push me. You said it's going to be up tomorrow. So after we're done, I'm going to have a little video set up. I'm going to try to start doing lessons on YouTube because I've actually been doing that stuff before YouTube. When I was a little teenager, 17 years old, when the internet just started, I had a website, DoryLobel.com. Now it's a new website, but I used to do guitar lessons before anyone was doing that stuff because I'm such a nerd about that stuff. But I'm very excited. I always joke that in my mind, heaven would be being in a guitar podcast and just talking about gear and that kind of stuff. I love it.
Well, I think
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I think that probably the departure compared to Jude is that it will probably be more equipment centric. Maybe
which is also great.
Jude's, it might be a passing sentence. But
he talks about that stuff too. He likes it as well.
Yeah. Although Jude is, I'd love to have him on here. I know I think he has a Music Man endorsement or something like that, and
yeah,
I think he kind of just uses whatever's there. Like they'll do these in the hotel room. They're like, all right, we got some great amps, and we're just gonna plug into them.
Yeah, he sounds good. Well, again, we just started kind of texting. I knew eventually our paths would cross, and I met him in NAMM. But I'm such a big fan of his, not aside from the fact that he's an amazing guitar player and journalist, just his kind of love for the instrument and his spirit, just so positive. And that's something, it's very, I don't like saying that it sounds kind of cheesy or corny, but like childlike, that childlike love of music. And he's so supportive, and he can play. He has some people who are the most amazing, technically proficient shredders, and some people that are just band guys, and he appreciates both equally. And I'm the same way. It took me a while to get there because I grew up just wanting to be, John Petrucci, Dimebag Darrell, Yngwie Malmsteen, all that stuff. Then Stevie Ray Vaughan. But then now I genuinely love, Kurt Cobain, all those people. It's not that I'm seeing why it's cool. I think it's just as valid, and it's all. I still have all my metal roots and stuff. So it just, when you're younger, you think that maybe you have to exclude some stuff or pick, and as you get older, you see it's really not. It's not true at all. It's all cool.
Yeah, there's some wisdom in sort of the move away from dogmatism or orthodoxy around that you can only play a specific type of or specific types of music. Most people seem to outgrow that, at least if they're getting enough musical nutrients in their experience.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people, by the time maybe they do that, they're not, they basically either they didn't pursue a professional career or they tried and it didn't work out. So I'm in an interesting spot. We'll get to that later. But one of the cool things, a lot of my career, the different artists I've toured with, I actually got to touch on a lot of the stuff. Like I always use the metaphor that, and again, there's so much to talk about, but about generally the music business and the uncertainties, especially now with COVID. But I always think that if you imagine your life as certain bank accounts or piggy banks that you deposit time into, basically, since I was 13, I've been basically depositing into the same account that I'm drawing from now. When I was practicing Metallica stuff, literally when I was 12, 13 years old, I'm still playing all these things now. I could be on The Voice or with Backstreet Boys, or a Voice example. We played with Billy Idol. He came down and we had to do all this stuff with Steve Stevens, and I'm literally playing exactly the stuff that I learned when I was 12 years old. It's a direct line that has been cut off, and I get to use it, and feed my family with it. So so I always see any time that I'm sitting with the instrument, especially you don't always know what's generating income, what's not. Because it's what I love to do anyway. So sometimes I feel guilty with my wife. Am I just messing around right now, wasting time, or am I actually working? And it is ultimately, it's all working, because when you get called for a gig or you have to do something, you're using every single moment I spend with the guitar. I'm actually building on something that's the whole that I actually have to draw from. You never know exactly, you can't pinpoint exactly how it comes out, but it's there,
Right. Now, with Ju Gold, he's, been sort of was the head at MI for a good long time. I'd imagine that was after you left there.
Yeah, that was after my time.
Who was the director when you were there?
It was Beth Marlis. You know her?
No.
But I studied with Dan Gilbert, who's a very famous teacher there. My time at MI, I mean, do you want to, you kind of, because I love this, and I have time, and I'm excited to do this. So you kind of lead me to what you want.
It's loose, man. I mean, we can go,
cool.
We can go wherever you want with it.
Because I'm such a connoisseur of podcasts, I usually don't like the whole coming of, like the origin story, because I feel like a lot of times it's boring and everyone has the same thing. So I can but what I do love hearing about is how people got their first auditions, and that stuff is really juicy and fun. So
yeah,
and I have a lot of those stories too.
And I'm more interested in like how you met Justin Derrico.
Yeah.
And like who are like the guys, because every sort of graduating class at MI invariably seems to have like maybe a group of people that all become very successul in their respective fields. Like, other than you and Justin, who are those people? I also want to know, like, did you do any lessons with Scott Henderson?
yeah, actually did a lot. So basically, in a nutshell, I'll skip over all the stuff of being kid. It was a regular story. I used to, I loved, my first cassettes at the time. I just turned 40, so I'm older, but I got to, just as I was finishing high school, we had the internet and stuff. So I feel like it's a nice opportunity where I grew up without internet and all that stuff, but still with computers and everything. But I was just like kind of like a straight ahead metal kid, Metallica and Megadeth and Pantera were my gods, then, seventh grade. And then, but I also always liked kind of electronica music, but very aggressive stuff, like the Prodigy, Nine Inch Nails, that kind of stuff. But and still to this day, I feel like ultimately my identity, my DNA is really kind of like dark, aggressive, and it's funny because that hasn't necessarily come out directly in the work I do, because I play with a lot of big pop artists who are very kind of happy music, but that aggression I still definitely translates and helps in doing my job. I'll tell you about that afterwards and remind me about the Backstreet Boys heavy metal story. Right. But with but then I kind of evolved throughout high school and everything. I discovered, I remember prog metal and Dream Theater. Like, again, like a lot of my friends, Matteo Sasato, him was one of the most brilliant guitar players. He's like a John Petrucci junkie. And I told John Petrucci, I met him at NAMM. I used to walk around, and it's so embarrassing, but I had a picture of him in my wallet in high school that I cut out of Guitar Player magazine, because I think, especially I grew up in Israel, and, it's not, I thought because Israel is a small country that it's just because it's a small country, people don't know Dream Theater. I assumed that, or instrumental music, that kind of stuff. I assumed once I get to big America, there's like millions of people that love that. And for me, that was like such, my secret with myself. Like, this is what I love. And I remember having a CD player and just listening. Greg Howe and John Petrucci were my gods. And, I would just listen to instrumental music. And, then I evolved, and kind of the usual path, Stevie Ray Vaughan, then Albert King, Albert Collins, then major Stevie Wonder phase, and Dr. Dre, and then Smiths and all stuff. So I kind of covered. I liked a lot of stuff, and then when I moved to the States, when I was 23, and I was actually enrolled to go to college for computer science and psychology. I totally didn't think that music is a viable career choice. And even though I was I was working professionally in Israel with amazing musicians, and I was by far the worst one and the youngest one there, but I got some cover gig with people that are very, very famous. actually just the movie Zohan, You Don't Mess with the Zohan.
Yeah.
So I actually just now I'm watching it as I'm working out, and like I watch it because I do it in 30-minute increments. I don't watch a lot of TV, but that's my time, when I work out. And the opening song is like a hip hop Israeli band.
Wasn't Shlomo?
No, but they're called like basically the Serpent in Dag Nachash. So they're the most famous Israeli hip hop band, and Israel, because it's a smaller market, even though those guys, if they were here, there would be multi-millionaires. There were celebrities there, like the most famous people, but they also had a cover band that I got to play guitar in with those guys. So that was my first gig. And again, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, hanging on for dear life, but it was okay enough, But anyway, but then I just didn't think, and I remember they're all talking about how it's hard to make a living in Israel, blah blah blah, and so I just said, it's not for me. It's not even a career choice, but I'll go to MI for 1 year before I start actual school, and for psychology and science. Then I came to the States, and similar story to what Justin Derrico was saying. So I'm looking at the mic. I also tested out, and actually, unlike Justin is a much more kind of schooled player than I am. He kind of really, he does way more. He does a lot of jazz. He's amazing, and I don't play jazz at all. And he came up from the bluegrass stuff. I really was more of kind of like a roots rock, metal, blues, funk, R&B, that kind of stuff. I always really was interested in production, that kind of thing. And so I really put a lot of emphasis on the technical aspect and playing very difficult things and really studying the history of music, but not as much going deep into jazz and that kind of stuff. It just never really pulled me, Yeah. And so when I came to MI, I had no idea. It was my first time to actually be in a music school. I had no idea what I know or what I don't know, but I was still able to test out basically out of the whole program, not just it's in levels. It's level 1 and 2 is a year. Then you graduate the school. Then you can come back for the professional program, which is level 3. And I tested basically out of every single thing except of I think music. And I couldn't read. I'm still a terrible reader, but somehow I was able to. I knew enough of the concepts to do the math in my head. When they asked me what are the exact notes in the F sharp diminished scale, so I would just go, imagine the fretboard and do it, and test it out of the whole thing. I'll fast forward a little bit anyway, but it's still, so basically what it came to is I was still enrolled to the school, but it has what's called open counseling, which you can basically walk around from room to room, and you have amazing teachers just teaching there, and you can pick a la carte whatever you want. That's in addition to the actual core curriculum. So because I actually tested out of the core curriculum, that's all I did for 6 months, morning to night. I loved it so much, and I didn't eat lunch. I would just literally play guitar all day, going from room to room with Scott Henderson that you mentioned before, which I loved. I loved all the tribal tech stuff, even though, again, I'm not a fusion guy at all, but he has that whole Stevie Ray thing, and he was super cool. But whenever we would jam, because we actually played a lot together, I would always be putting myself down, saying, okay, I don't play jazz, and I feel like my dynamics are all over the place as far, it's like, we have certain ideals that we try to get to as kind of studio guys and perfectionists. So I was like, man, it should be more even, my dynamics. And he said, no, I love it when it's like that. I remember that really stuck with me because he likes it to be more raw, and we got to play a bunch. And he's also the biggest takeaway from him is the most humble, sweet guy. Like most players, if you talk to almost all my friends, if you see us talking about how we play, it's always, oh man, I suck. I play like shit. I need to practice. It sounds horrible. And it's not just putting on an act. I feel like there's a certain quality of, if you're able, what separates a lot of good players or bad players from really, really good players is being able to listen to something and hearing what it is all the way through. So for instance, if I'm listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan, as I get older, I get how great he is even more, the nuances of his time, or Gary Moore, all those players. And you try to get close to that, or Brian May or David Gilmour, all those players, or even Dimebag. Just basically, the more you revisit stuff, you want to sound like them, but you're not satisfied with being kind of close. You really want it to sound like them. I feel like that's a quality that a lot of good players have. And for me, since I was a kid, I wouldn't be like, oh, cool, can play this riff, Metallica riff. It sounds good. I said, why? It has to sound exactly as good as James Hetfield, which of course it did, and because that guy is one of the best rhythm guitar players. But still, to this day, when I try to learn something, I don't say, well, obviously, that's Jimi Hendrix, so he's way better than me. So obviously I'm not going to sound like that. I know that's the case, and I'm not going to sound like him, but I still try, because I know at the end of the day, those people were human beings. So I always try to make it sound as good, and with Scott Henderson, even though he's one of the best guitar players in the world, he would always be, oh man, I suck, dude. He had a list of things he was working on, and that humility. We had Ted Green, was a famous jazz teacher, legendary. He came to talk at MI when I was there, and I remember Scott was sitting cross-legged in the front, on the floor at his feet in front of all the students, just taking notes and stuff. So that was a really cool thing to see, and it just kind of confirmed what I already knew and know even now after 17 years in the industry. That the people that are most successful are the nicest people, the most humble. There are a few exceptions because you need to have a little bit of ego to play kind of aggressively and stuff. So it's a combination. It's a combination of being proud, sometimes being happy with your playing, having a little bit of cockiness to come off as confident, but also being humble enough to push yourself, and keep practicing.
So when you landed in the U.S. from Israel and you're at MI, did you have a rig at that point, or was it just?
Yeah, it's actually I've always been super into gear, and I was always even to this day. There's some I'm kind of like it's what I said before. I'm always really hard on myself, and there's some weird things that I do, some funny choices that I still don't know why I'm doing it, and I've managed to make them work. I see the cute dog behind you. But what I've always, the main thing, and that goes back from the time I was a kid all the way to now, I've never really been able to I've never used amp distortion much in live settings. I use it all the time in the studio. Everything I use is always the purest as possible. I can get into my recording chain soon, but it's just cranked amps, Silvertones and Marshalls and Bad Cats and all that stuff. But for live, I don't know if it's because maybe I grew up in Israel, but like a lot of people, out of the cover gigs we did, there wasn't a lot of gear, so it didn't really make sense to have a double, 2-channel tube amp, and especially Israel gear is way more expensive. Everything costs at least double what it does here because you have to pay the taxes. What is it called? Never mind. Like the kind of import taxes for that. So everything is more expensive. So I just had, my rig was like a little Marshall solid state thing, valve state, but I always relied since I was really young on overdrive pedals and really try to get good ones. And I was never super happy with them. I knew they don't sound as good as the real thing, but I've been able to make them work, and a lot of times because my context was always not just what I'm playing, but how is it sitting in a mix and what is the audience perceiving, then a lot of those differences kind of become less obvious, So of course, a real amp is going to sound a million times better and going to feel a lot better. But if you're playing parts and it's going through a mic and it's going through the mix and it's going through the PA, at the end of the day, often for me, I've felt like it actually, the versatility of having different pedals was actually more than compensated for not having the amp do the distortion. So my setup was always, when I was young, and this actually carried me through a lot through my career here, I would always have a few analog overdrive pedals, different ones. Some of them, we'll get to that also, but Justin talked about it, and I actually got him to use the OD3, the Boss OD3. And I remember my parents would go on trips to New York or something, and I would send them to Sam Ash every time and ask for a pedal, So they came back, and I got the BD2, the Blues Driver Boss, the blue one, and the orange OD3. And I just kind of stumbled onto it. It was just lucky, but people don't realize how amazing that pedal is because it's not like the SD, all the Boss Tube Screamer cloney ones. It's a much more high tech designs. You'll be able to know the specifics, but I think it's a higher current pedal. It's basically more of an emulation of an amp,
Mhm.
and it's a lot more hi-fi, kind of has a full frequency. So I had that, and I had, Tube Screamer and stuff, and then I would always go into a big multi-effect processor. I'm checking the mic. So at the time in Israel, I had the Boss GT6. Do you remember that one?
Yep.
Um, so basically, I would have that be either in presets, or it actually had a little. You can program one of the pedals to switch from preset mode to stomp box mode.
Mhm.
So depending on the gig, I was in a YouTube tribute band. I remember it actually sounded really good, and I would program exact presets for each thing. So all my gain, and I had an envelope filter, Guiatone Wow Rocker, which is a great one, the WR2. I
Purple.
had, yeah, exactly. I had super fun. Where is it? It's somewhere. Actually, just, oh, here, you see, this is just for fun. I did a little for my studio, like a little fuzz thing that's not in a loop that I can just go into.
Right.
So it's this guy, actually. I've had it since I was a kid. It's a great fuzz. So I had that, the Blues Driver, and Tube Screamer, and the OD3 going into the Boss GT6, and it was great because I had all my analog distortions and all the, anything that I want to do the most elaborate reverb and delay and modulation. I just had that there, and to me, and it was it wasn't a very common thing to see. You still don't see, or if you see someone using that, it's kind of looked down on, because having a multi-effect floor processor is the farthest from anything boutiquey, but it really did work. But that Boss at the time, I felt like it did compromise the tone a little bit, the conversion and everything.
Right.
And then I had that same type of rig all the way until I was doing Backstreet Boys in 2009, all throughout my whole career. But I had the Line 6 Pod XT Live,
Yep.
which is actually the same sounds as the M9, that I saw David Grissom talked about. So
yeah.
I had that, but I had a really nice big board with tons of, like analog compressors and anything that needed to be analog, and a few different things, and even analog delays. But when I needed to have a one press full sound, I would use that and the multi-effect, because I do love the programmability of kind of more elaborate machines,
Yeah.
But,
So when you how long were you at MI in total?
so it was around 6 months, but then I completely finished everything, even the reading class that I needed to do. But I was basically in America for a year, so I still kind of paid to be able to go and do all the live playing workshops that are called, and just basically the one-on-one lessons. Basically, you can just kind of go. It's like a buffet, and you can do it as much as you want. Because I really had nothing to do here. I was staying with my uncle, so I wasn't paying rent. I have my mom's brother. Always, since I was a little kid, he always said, once you finish high school, come, or before you go to college, come stay with me for a year in LA. And when I'd come to visit, he'd let me use his car and stuff. So it was awesome. So I just basically had no worries. I just had my guitar and it was at MI. And actually, I met Justin. We actually didn't go at the same time.
Mm.
There was a guy, an amazing teacher that Justin still talks a lot about and studies with, Jean-Marc Belkadi. Have you heard of him?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he did an episode in No Guitar is Safe. So he was my teacher as well. And even though he was much more jazz oriented, I always felt a little bit like a fraud out there, because I never had any interest in properly. I always joke, and it's true, I don't know one jazz standard. I've never opened a real book. And I really appreciate that stuff. Just for whatever reason, even though I tried and I knew I had to do it, something in my being didn't pull me. It just seemed like it wasn't me. And I knew that you're supposed to do that if you want to be a professional guitar player. But all the strength in the world, and I love Wes Montgomery and Pat Martino, and Pat Metheny, loved them, and I transcribed a bunch of solos, but it didn't stick. So even with Jean-Marc, I always felt like I'm kind of wasting his time, because he's such an advanced teacher. But he, again, kind of like Scott Henderson, they always, I was kind of like the rock funk shred guy, and also very into Robin Ford, I know is a Vertex user. So I kind of had a connection with Jean-Marc, and then he taught Justin after I already left the school. But at the time, I was also, the MI has like the playing competition of the school, and again, to my surprise, actually, I won that thing, because I never felt like was kind of like a little bit more of a rebel, not rebel in the sense of I love the school, but I was not the typical music student, you know, was doing everything and the fusion stuff. There's certain things that I loved, which I knew exactly what they were, the country and the R&B and the funk and the rock, but I didn't do a lot of stuff. I wasn't like a very super well-rounded player or student, but still I actually won this amp there, that 70s Marshall. It's a JMP
So 50 or okay,
it's a 50, and it's funny because at the time
that's the best one to get.
Yeah, and you know it's funny, they had the competition. They said it was modified by Mike Soldano, and because it has an extra little click switch on the side here.
Okay.
And I thought it was an extra gain switch, and it's amazing, an incredible amp. And I had Dave Friedman, who I use this stuff, is actually sitting on top of it. I went to Dave's shop. That's another funny little story on its own. I got the Brown Eye 50 Deluxe. That's a new one, and it's still at my house. I felt like the vintage Marshall had a little bit kind of more juice, you know, like a little more kind of a voice, like a mid-range that speaks, you know. So I told Dave, I said, can I come to your shop and maybe you'll see if we can do something to check it out. And then I brought my Marshalls. First of all, he opened up the Marshall to see what's going on there, and he said it's not a Soldano mod, because he's able to know, you know, he knows by the handiwork and by the little trademarks and stuff like that. So he said, no, that's not a Soldano. I think that's a different mod. And all it is, by the way, it's basically like a treble bleed for the master volume. So it functions like a gain knob because basically just letting more sound through if your master is not all the way. So, but you totally feel like it's a gain knob. But then what he did is he has a trick which he does. He has an AB head switcher. Do you know about that thing that he does?
Huh. No, I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, so he basically has an AB thing, and on just a regular foot switch with no light, and he plugs both amps, and he tweaks it and stuff like that. And he told me get a sound in your vintage Marshall that you like, and I got it. And then he goes to his, he tweaks it, and then he starts going click 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 click. So you don't know what you're playing anymore. And after a few times of tweaking, he was like, "Which one is yours?" And I was sure that he's not going to be able to trick me. And then I was playing. I was like, "Man, this sounds awesome. This has to be mine." I was like, "This is mine." He was like, "No, sorry, that's mine. That's the Friedman." So I told him, "Dude, okay, I can't argue with that. Like, you just if that, you know, it sounded you made it sound identical to the vintage Marshall."
Nice.
And you know, the amp has a lot of different knobs on the switches and stuff. But that was a fun experience. So anyway, I won. Sorry, you'll have to rein me in a little bit because.
Yeah, what did you play? What did you play to win the competition?
The competition, it was actually, I actually remember we had you had a few backing tracks. It was kind of like the Guitar Center, you know, they have the Guitar Center competitions as well.
Yeah.
Which you choose a backing track and then do stuff. But I remember I just basically did all my stuff. It was like some rock stuff. Then I actually had my Boss GT6 and programmed a bunch of kind of U2 delays for ambient stuff, but did it with gain, so it didn't sound like super edgy, but you know, sounded rhythmic, more like, you know, the Nuno Betancourt stuff, the Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee. Yeah. And just played a little bit of everything, I remember, and I won that thing, and I got that amp, and I remember one of the things it's a funny story that always stuck with me. One of the teachers there. When I moved here, I actually got like super old for $3,000. I got a super old Lexus, but it was one of the high-end models that they had. It was like the top of the line, but super old. So it was still cool, but it literally cost me $3,000, and it did not. You know, the radiator didn't. It kept leaking all the time. So it was a horrible car, but it looked like a Lexus. And I remember one of the teachers. He told me I had a friend there, Manu, and a guy. Was really cool, and he said he thinks you're really rich because you're driving a Lexus. So I was like, that Lexus costs $3,000. And then one of the teachers actually took me aside before the competition, and I remember that stuck with. That's another little lesson about kind of how you don't want to be in the music industry. And I remember he told me, he said, I remember he said, "Can we talk for a second?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he said, "You know, never mind." I said, "What? Tell me." I know you can win that amp in the competition, but do you really need that amp? Maybe there are kids in the school that need it more. And it's because it's the same guy that my friend told me that he thought I was rich because of that cheap Lexus. And it's funny because I like literally all the time I would stop on the 101 with a water bottle to fill the radiator. And even when I had my first audition, or one of the first with Barry Squire that Justin mentioned, I remember I had to park far away because I was so embarrassed that it would not start or overheat in front of the where the artist was coming out of. And so, but it's funny that car made it look like I was somewhat successful, but it was completely broke. But anyway, but then so I told him, I was like, I really need that amplifier. Yes, I want to win that competition, and I got the amp. But then afterwards, Justin, and by the way, the Jean-Marc has the funniest story, which is not true, but he actually tells that story all the time. He says, is this going to be censored, or can we use swear words a little bit?
No, you can use them. Yeah.
Yeah, because he said, because I think I won the competition, and I genuinely said at the end, I remember they said the winner is Dory, blah, blah, blah. And I got to pick. They had this amp, they had another modified Fender vintage one. They just had 2 amps in school, so they're giving them to the winner. And I said, I just want to say, everyone, and I wasn't being like, I wasn't making it up. I just felt weird, kind of icky, the whole idea of a music competition. And I said, it's weird to compete for music. Everyone was so awesome, blah, blah, blah. And I remember Beth Marlis, the head of the guitar department, she said, we know, but that's the way it is. We have competitions, and we know it feels a little weird to have a competition, but do you still want any of these amps? And I said, yeah, of course. I mean, I'll take the Marshall. And so that was the story. But Jean-Marc tells it. He says he's French. He said, he came up, he was shredding, he was tapping, he was playing all over, he was throwing it. And then he finished, and they said, you win. And he told them, fuck you. He said, fuck you in your competition. And then he said, I take the Marshall. And I told him, so I wish that would be funny, but it's totally not what happened. But he always tells that story to students after the fact.
I think it sounds more flamboyant, that's for sure. Yeah.
But I think that's in his mind. That's what he was saying. But yeah, but it totally wasn't for me. I was just surprised. I mean, the whole time, it's all imposter syndrome the whole time, and a lot of people talk about that. And in the music world, you never. Some people maybe do. Some people that are mega schooled and have done a lot of stuff, but it's such an infinite thing to learn how to be a player and musician. I'm 40 now, and I'm way farther than I realize how far I am from reaching my goals. I'm not even trying to do it. When I was young, I thought, I'll get to a point where I know everything I need to know. Now it's like you give me 10 lifetimes and I won't be able to scratch the surface of what I want to do. So right. It's but at the time, I remember I always felt like, I loved MI was incredible for me. It was one of the most fun times in my life, but I felt like, again, like I was getting what I could out of it, but I didn't come out of it, for instance, a great reader or anything like that, because it just really, you have to incorporate something into your actual career for it to really be good. That's the only way to practice. There's only a certain amount where you can progress if you're artificially practicing it, if you're not implementing it in the real world. Yeah. But anyway, but Jean-Marc, the guy, I said I won't talk about it a lot, but now it's long. I'll try to cut it super short. So Jean-Marc told me, he taught Justin afterwards, and Justin was definitely the best player in his class by far. And he was like in everything, like also jazz player and everything. And Jean-Marc just said, you guys need to talk to each other. You badass. You need to talk. You need to be friends. And literally introduced us. I came to visit after I was done, and actually have a picture, I think, from that day. It was really funny. And I just met Justin, and we stayed really good. To this day, he's one of my best friends. And he talked about how, like the first audition he got was when I got called.
Yeah, you turned him on to the gig.
Yeah, which was funny because I was not even close to getting that gig. Like he was already basically as cool as he is now. He looked great, and he was like a Virginia cowboy with all his stuff together. I was super.
Did he have his tattoos back then? Because that definitely sold it. He didn't
have the tattoos, but he had long blonde hair, and cowboy boots, and it was really who he is. And he had also kind of his gear was more put together. For me, I was very much kind of like the Israeli guy from, like worst clothing and style in history. Then I'm lucky that I got my first gig, and the guy I got the gig with, Jesse McCartney, we can talk about that, but he still teases me for how I looked in the auditions, what I was wearing. because I knew nothing about any of that stuff style. I still don't know that much, but I know that the simpler and just wear a black t-shirt and good jeans and nothing, so you don't offend anyone. But with Justin, I remember I came in and I had like a little board that I cut from Home Depot with Velcro, and it was like super not pro at all, so it wasn't even like Justin got the gig instead of me. It was obvious. It was very obvious to me that I didn't get it. But quickly after that, I got, through the same guy, Barry Squire, actually got a gig with the artist I mentioned, Jesse McCartney, and that was for a musical director gig, which I didn't know what a musical director does. But it's funny how you kind of end up where you need to. I really hit it off with his management, with him, and with the people at Hollywood Records. He was kind of like the new, kind of like not similar to the trajectory to what Justin Bieber was when he came out, but at the time, and he also had a #1 album and platinum #1 songs. But at the time there wasn't as much social media and stuff. I think if he came out now, he could very well have been a Justin Bieber, but he's still sustaining an amazing career all the way to this day. We're actually still working together all the time, which we can touch on about the future of the music industry, because we actually do some interesting things. But then I got that gig. Luckily, it was a long auditioning process with a lot of great players. I remember that came through. I'm not going to name them, but a lot of people that I know who were amazing players who had gigantic gigs. But I think because the gig was for musical director with Jesse, and this was very soon after Justin got that calling gig. This was 2004. So basically, I think part of the thing was to show some music that I've done, and I'll touch on it in a second, or actually I'll just say it and not touch on it. But my friend was an editor for NBC. He kind of got an entry-level job, actually just logging videos, where they have it was the Olympics in 2004. So my friend had to log in and timestamp everything, and he overheard that they're looking for music they're not happy with the music for one of the promos. So he asked me if I wanted to do something, and I did something really quickly and sent it to him within an hour, and it actually made the commercial. It was like a heavy metal Limp Bizkit style thing of Mission Impossible for Michael Phelps.
Uh-huh.
So I did that, and it was definitely life-changing as far as breaking in, not because it gave me that many opportunities or that much money, which it didn't, but just seeing my commercial, because they ran that commercial nonstop, and and I'm big Tonight, Conan O'Brien show and fan, since we have it in Israel. I did most of my practicing watching the Tonight Show and Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and then they would play my Michael Phelps commercial all the time. This was when I was basically just out of MI. And I remember that's when I decided, when I saw that, I just told my parents that I'm not coming back to study psychology and computer science. I'm going to push it 1 year, because it seemed all of a sudden like very real. Like I could, it's hard to gauge if you have any shot in music, because you don't know how good you need to be or if you're good enough. But that was a very validating thing when I actually would hear, I remember seeing Jay Leno, and right after that, my music, people talk about the first time they hear their own playing on TV or on the radio. So that was a big moment for me. I remember where I was, and I made the decision to stay another year. And when I got called for the audition with Jesse McCartney, they also, because it was to be musical director and put his whole show together and everything, it was more of a holistic thing where they listened to a lot of my music. And maybe 4 months later only, they actually called and hired me, because they were just basically looking at a lot of people. And that's where my career really started, from 0 to 100. And I've been basically, that was a start, and I'm still kind of riding that same thing, even though it wasn't all necessarily connected, but it was kind of similar with the way Justin got the calling. I got the gig. The next thing I'm, at Hollywood Records, arranging all of Jesse's songs from his upcoming album on acoustic guitar. I didn't even have an acoustic guitar with a pickup. I had a Martin D1 that I bought, vintage. Are you from LA?
Santa Barbara area, but yeah, the only place you could go guitar shopping with anything meaningful was in LA. So
yeah, because I remember Vintage Gear, the store next to Guitar Center on Gardner. That was
the one off of Sunset.
Yeah, there was Voltage Guitars, Vintage Gear.
Yeah, and then Mesa Hollywood was across.
Exactly, Mesa Boogie, they're there, and I love those guys to death. Yeah, and I got a lot of my best guitars from them.
They had I can't remember the name of the place. It was like if you're facing Guitar Center, it was to the left. And it had the best pedal selection. It had all.
Yes. So the corner one was Vintage Gear, and that was kind of my store. And I learned some. Actually, one of my still my favorite people in the world, one of my best friends, Matt Chait. I don't know if you know him. He's in Nashville now, but he used to work at Vintage Gear, and he's an amazing guitar player himself. He was on a lot of big sessions and stuff. But I learned so much from that guy because he's the one who taught me about what real tone is. I remember he told me. We're jumping around a little bit, but I remember I came to the States. This was before AMI, and I didn't have gear. I just came here with a Hamer, which is now it's in my house, not in my studio, and literally nothing. Maybe a few pedals, no amp, nothing. And I needed a guitar to start MI, and I looked everywhere. And at the time I was a Strat guy, so I knew I wanted a great Strat. And I went to all the stores, and I ended up getting a Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat. It's a cool guitar. It has different pickups and stuff, but it's like my backup E flat Strat now. But Matt, I remember he told me, he said, if you want tone, go across the street to Mesa Boogie, get a 112 cabinet, because the cabinet doesn't have to be vintage. Just get like their recto cabinet. It's an oversized 112. It's really small, but sounds great. He said, get that and then get a vintage head. And I got a silver tone and an amp. Is it here? It's here. I have one of the first Mesa Boogie Mark Ones. And this was very inexpensive. It was $300 for the silver tone and $1,000 for the Mesa. And I remember they said usually like they're super purists there at that store. So they said normally we don't like Mesas, but this Mesa, it's one of the ones he built in his garage, and it sounds just like a souped up Fender, but it's the same one Carlos Santana used to use. So I got that one, and that was basically those. And actually a Music Man, one of those 70s heads. Also, I got it for $300. So that was my rig. I didn't do a lot of live work, but to record, I basically had 3 heads and the Mesa Recto cab, which Scott Henderson actually told me, instead of building an ISO cab, just if you have just the cab, it doesn't get hot, so you can cover it. Because if you have the actual amp, you can't close it up because it needs circulation. But I just I used to go to Home Depot, buy literally 10 moving blankets. So I just dumped them on the cab and really took all the noise out with an SM57 with a speaker cable out it, and I had a little computer, and that was my rig for a long time, And but I mentioned Matt Chait. So he worked at that store, and he's still one of my good friends, and he designed this fuzz pedal. It's a prototype that they never went into production, but really smart stuff. It like has a built-in volume attenuator, so you can do that thing where you clean up the fuzz with your guitar, but actually it has it built into the pedal, and you can preset 2 of them. So I forgot why we're even talking about this now, but that's oh yeah, I didn't have an acoustic guitar when I got my first gig, so I literally had to call Taylor Guitars, ask if I said I just got a gig and I need a guitar, so they let me borrow one, which I ended up buying, which I still use that one. But when I got that gig, it went, then a week later I was going all over the country to all the radio shows, to do morning shows, just Jesse and myself. And then we went to Italy and to Europe, and my parents flew from Israel to see, and I remember he was very, very big. He still has an amazing fan base around the world, but my parents thought there were protests, and because they couldn't get to our hotel, and they were sure. They said, there's something going on. And they said, no, they're here for our show. And I remember they freaked out, and they spent a weekend with us in Italy. But that was nice because it was kind of really, and I never really had local gigs in LA. It's funny, never. I never played a club here. I did it in Israel a lot, but I was just here, and I was lucky to get like a major gig and start touring and stuff. And that led afterwards to the Backstreet Boys, which I did for a long time, and then Colby Calais I did for a few years, and then The Voice, 2013. The last 7 years I've been doing The Voice.
Yeah. And when you went to Backstreet Boys, what era was that? Was that in the mid 2000s or?
So I basically, when I was with Jesse, we got to open some shows for Backstreet Boys. It was a deal with their management because Jonas Brothers, now they're gigantic. They were new, and they were the same management as Backstreet Boys. So they made a deal where they get to open for us on 7 shows for Jesse's band. And then Jesse gets to open for Backstreet Boys in Europe. We did Wembley, all those big shows. And I remember at the time I was way more ambitious than I am now. And now, you get older and you get kind of complacent. But at the time I was super hot-headed. I wanted to network and all that stuff. And I knew I looked, and it's funny because Backstreet Boys, even though I was into heavy metal when I was a kid, I always thought Backstreet Boys were really cool. I was never a major NSYNC fan, but Backstreet, they were kind of like Boys to Men to me, and I loved Boys to Men. I always loved R&B and Bobby Brown, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So what I always thought that, and Backstreet, they have AJ's kind of like a rock dude, and they all love Chris Cornell. Nick Carter is actually a mega rock guy. Really, really cool people. And so I was really excited. And this was pretty quick. This was 2005. So it was only maybe 2 years within moving to the States. And so we were their opening act. But I remember I was just like so impressed with their band is amazing. And it's the musical director is Kevin Antunes, who's the biggest in the world. He's been doing Madonna and everything. He's major. And he does all the Justin Timberlake stuff as well, or at the time he did. But I remember when I met him, it was really important for me on that tour to try to kind of pick his brain about stuff and, and catering, to talk to him and everything, and try to make a good impression, like people should do. I don't do it anymore now. Now I'm just, I don't know. It's just, you get a little less driven about if there's networking that happens organically, that's my favorite thing. I love connecting with people and making friends, but the act of trying to do stuff where you feel like you really want to get a job or something like that, some people still have it going. I kind of lost that muscle a little bit. I think it's all the people on The Voice that happens to you, because you're in your own bubble and you're fortunate to be making good living and stuff, and you feel isolated and you feel like you don't really have to do it, so, which is a nice place to be in, but it's not. But I'm, as advice to other people, I say, don't be like me. Like, you should be out there and network more. But at the time I was really kind of like, trying to network. And I remember even specifically we would jam before shows, and I would really, whenever the Backstreet Boys band, the musicians would check our sound check out, I remember it was really important for me to like play well and everything. And sure enough, at the end of that tour, I went to visit my family in Israel because it was in Europe. And then I got a call if I could sub on one or two shows, maybe one show, for Backstreet Boys. Not too long after that, because they did a really sweet thing. They did a surprise birthday party for their guitar player, Skip, who's a very famous funk guitar player. And they told him that a gig was canceled so he can be with his family for his birthday. But they didn't want him to feel like he's losing a gig or anything, which he didn't. It felt weird to kind of surprise someone by, covering him for a gig that he didn't ask you to. But they're like a family, that band. So they asked me if I could do that. And I flew in for one show with Backstreet Boys. And no rehearsals, nothing. It was Razorback Stadium, I think, something crazy. It was like 40,000 people, and I learned the whole show. And I remember there was one moment where there's a song, Incomplete, where like it's kind of a ballad, and then it goes into a big rock thing, and I hit it as hard as, basically like full gain, like metal. And I remember all four of them turned around. They were sitting on stools at the time, and turned around like, what happened? But they're really happy about it. And to me, that's another moment that sticks out, because I played that differently. The whole band was from kind of Minneapolis funk, and they were amazing in that, but they didn't approach it as rocking as I did specifically in that moment, and they like it, especially also when it's nice to change some stuff up. But then, so that was that. I did the gig. It was great. I remember hanging out with them, and that's it. And then I haven't heard from them for a couple of years. And then 2 years later, I got a call from their tour manager that the whole band that was playing with them at the time that I filled in with, they got the gig to do the Justin Timberlake stuff when he was at his absolute height, when Future Sex Love Sounds, that album came out with Timbaland. So they all moved as a unit to Justin. So Backstreet Boys needed a new band. And it was funny because they were looking at people for a while, I think, and auditioning people. And then the tour manager, Andre Morales, was an amazing guy. He said, remember that guy that filled in that one show that you got to do a few years ago? What about him? And because they're scrambling for people. And I got a call out of the blue, and he said, hey, I think, do you want to come audition for Backstreet? And I said, yeah, of course. And so I came in, and again, it was a similar thing to Jesse, where I auditioned and I haven't heard back from them in a while. and I was sure that I'm not getting that I didn't get that gig. And then I got called to do something else. With, Nicole Scherzinger, from the Pussycat Dolls, and I forget how that came about, but because it's actually I haven't done a million auditions in my life. I did a few, and a few I didn't get, and the few that I have gotten sustained me through probably almost 20 years of a career. But I wasn't super in the scene of getting called for tons of auditions. But so I got a call to play with Nicole from the Pussycat Dolls, and I was about to start rehearsals the next day, and then I get a call from Backstreet. Hey, you're in the band. You need to you can start. And I was already obligated for Nicole, and I remember actually a person who saved my butt twice is my friend Brian Siono, who's an amazing bass player. He did Backstreet with me, and he's been doing now stuff working on The Masked Singer, and he's been musical director for Jennifer Lopez. I don't know if you know him. He's a great. You can interview him too. He's an amazing bass player and producer and mixer. But he told me, I said, what am I supposed to do? Because I just got called to do Backstreet, and I'm not going to stand like there's a band, Nicole's band is waiting for me. So he told him, get Tim Stewart to do it, which Tim. And at the time, I didn't know Tim Stewart. I didn't know who he was, but I was really close friends with Bryant, and Bryant's very, very close with Tim. And this was 2007, and I said, who's Tim Stewart? And I Googled Tim Stewart, and I saw some videos of him, and I said, holy shit, this is the best guitar player in the world. He was amazing. He has some clips with Chris Dave, played with D'Angelo, old church clips, and it just blew my mind. And I called the musical director of Nicole, and I remember he was very upset because he didn't know me well. I was just recommended, and I said, hey, listen, I'm so sorry. I just got called to do the Backstreet Boys tour. And he said, but you already said you can do this. And I said, right, but listen, Tim Stewart can do the gig, because I called him before. And I remember Rob was like, Tim can do it? Tim Stewart can do it? Okay, that's fine. We're all good, man. Just have Tim call me. Cool, we're good, no worries. And then he was happy. So Tim saved my ass, and Tim did the Nicole Scherzinger thing.
Nice.
And but he was so good that just mentioning his name put the musical director at ease. And then actually I got to work a little bit with Rob Lewis, the musical director. We were cool. We worked together on other stuff. But anyway, that's how I got Backstreet. I started that, and then that was 2007, and I did that for a long time. It was the major tour, 2007, 8, 9, and then I still worked with them in like 2012 and stuff. But that was probably the most we did all these Madison Square Garden, all these big venues, and it was only a 4-piece, so I was the only guitar player there. And if you want, we can actually get into the rig I had there, because that's
what I was going to ask you about next. What was the Backstreet rig?
Yeah, is this, by the way, at all? Am I rambling way too much, talking too fast? This is
No, I think this is good. I mean, cool. if you get out of control, I'll bring you back.
Zap me, yeah. Yeah, or you can say, the subtle. You can say, I want to make sure we have enough time. But yeah, so Backstreet. So I got the Backstreet rig, and Jesse, by the way, Jesse McCartney was the same deal. I think I used the Align 6 thing with a lot of different pedals. I had the pedal pad. Remember that thing? It was like a box that you put stuff underneath.
Yep.
And by the way, I've always, every single rig up to in my entire life, I always built myself. I never had anyone build a rig for me. We can talk about that too, because I just like doing that stuff, and so far it worked pretty well. But I had on Backstreet, there's so much acoustic stuff that I needed to have a guitar that has a piezo pickup to run stereo. And I remember I called Godin Guitars, which I didn't know anything about. I just knew they had those pickups. So I called them and I said, I got the Backstreet Boys gig, and I think I bought 2 guitars from them. I didn't get them for free, but it was artist cost. They just sent me 2 guitars, and I'll bring them to here, I'll bring it. So nervous that people are going to say, why does that guy talk so you know how people see Phil X's clips, and people always they don't understand that he's just super high energy, and people always say, I wonder if he's high, and he's not high. He's super straight edge. And I got to hang out with him a bunch of times. The most amazing guy. He's just a very energetic guy who loves music, and a lot of times people are fed these days that if you're just super into something, it must be a substance, which is not. I'm just super hyper, and my wife is happy that I'm doing this. So I don't, because if I'm not talking to you, I'm bugging her about stuff. So anyway, I got these two guitars. I got this one, which sadly it's blue because I used to have just like I had terrible style with clothing. I had the same. I had horrible style with gear, and my approach was, if it sounds cool, then that's the most important thing. If it sounds and plays well. And then my friend, it's funny. It's not. It sounds like a name drop, but all these people that I'm mentioning were actually friends of mine before any of us had like a major gig. Justin, Tim was just in his start, and then Jared Scharf. Do you know Jared?
Yeah, from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. So Jared, we were friends because we just had a mutual friend. Actually, through Justin, my girlfriend at the time was friends with him from Virginia. So I was going out with a girl, and she knew Jared. So in New York, we met, and we hit it off right away. And I went to see him play a solo show. This was before I was actually. I think I had the Jesse McCartney gig. He was kind of a solo artist at the time. This was years before he got SNL, and now he's a mega producer, songwriter, but super cool guy. And he recorded. I used to tour, and I gave him a key to my house, and he recorded his second record at my house. And I remember, and he told me, he turned me on actually to a lot of really cool gear stuff. But he told me, he said, "Why don't play a blue guitar? You can't play a blue guitar." And also I bought a green ESP, those ESP tellies.
Yeah. And
he said, "Dude, don't play it. You cannot play a green or blue guitar." And a lot of people don't get why that's true, but it's kind of, I mean, if a doubt, some people are able to make it work, but if you're kind of stylistically, visually challenged like myself, it's better to stick with basics, I think. I give that advice because a lot of people ask me all the time, people write me emails, how do you get a gig? How do you audition? And I say, just don't try to make the statement be your playing and maybe your personality. But if you're unsure what's really cool, just stick with like a sunburst or a butterscotch telly or a sunburst telly with binding or a white. Just like don't go too out there if you're unsure. If you really know how to make something work, you can play a blue guitar and make that be amazing. But it's better to just not add a variable, that you don't know what the effect is going to be. But at the time, it's funny, it was a pop gig, and Jesse actually, Jesse McCartney, he loves this guitar because he loves blue guitars, because people that are not guitar players don't have those associations, like we have to be like Jimmy Page or Slash and all those people. But anyway, so this guitar, it's a really, really, really special guitar to me. It's an amazing instrument. And I just got it because I needed it for the acoustic thing, for the piezo.
Right.
And I didn't expect for it to be one of the best guitars. Still to this day, I have a million guitars, and it's one of the best sounding guitars ever made, I think, in the design of it, because it's built kind of like a telly. It's a 25.5 scale length. Basically, the construction is, it's a bolt-on, so it's like a telly, but it's mahogany neck and body, ebony fingerboard, and flame maple top and mahogany body. So it's basically, the woods are exactly like a Les Paul, and like a Les Paul custom, and the construction is like a telly. And it has Seymour Duncan humbuckers that can be split, and it has a piezo thing, and it sounds incredible. It's the most versatile guitar. You can make it sound like a telly, like a Strat, and have the acoustic stuff. And it's coming back to me that I had it for some of the Jesse stuff as well, because we did acoustic things. So for most of Jesse and all of Backstreet Boys, basically the whole almost decade of my career, the only two guitars I used on every single show, and if you look at the Backstreet Boys DVD, every Jesse McCartney performance, it's this guy and the Brown twin that I just had, the two of them, and that was it. That's all I used. And I remember a lot of people, the sound guy for Backstreet Boys, Jason Zito, he does One Republic. He's amazing. And I remember he told me when he saw me come in with two guitars, he said, "Really, how are you going to do the gig just with two?" But then he was one of the biggest fans of them afterwards, because they're just so versatile. And I did a few mods. Then it came with this is super geeky, but like the piezo saddles were open. It was a different brand. I think it was RMC. So I put the Ghost saddles by Graphtec, which are completely closed off, so moisture doesn't affect them. But other than that, everything's completely stock, and you can. This is also a great system where to get the split neck, you just go here, one next to the neck pickup, and split bridges here. So you really can make it sound like anything, and this one sounds a little bit better than the brown one, but both of them are amazing. This is a little more aggressive and angry sounding, but basically you would think it's either a Les Paul or a Tele, depending on what you want it to sound. And
are those made where are those made?
Those are made in Canada.
Okay.
And even things for people, if people like design and guitars, little things. Cause I spent so many years of my life with these guitars, and I remember. Sorry, I'm checking the mic. Just like practicing back of venues and everything, but different cool things. Like, I don't know if you can see this, but you see the line here, the headstock here.
Yeah.
They basically anticipate where the breaking point is of a headstock, where it's the most vulnerable spot, and they cut the head and they flip it over and they glue it there for the grain to fight against itself, to reinforce this section. And they have, sometimes the bridge is not grounded, you have to touch the bridge. So there's a thing here they have, like under this little plate here, they have a cable, a little wire that goes to make sure the bridge is grounded as well. Like little nuances that I keep discovering when I have to open it up. Right. And it's really, really well made, stays in tune. It's their own proprietary tuners. And so I love it to death. And I don't now, because it's kind of less, especially the blue one, it's less kind of my style, but I have the blue and the brown one. And after that, I kept rediscovering that, and I used the brown one on the voice as well, but I kept rediscovering that guitar and keep coming back to it. So I wanted to get another one, another Sunburst one. And I'm really friendly with Godin. Since then, I've gotten a few guitars from them and everything, and I performed for them at NAMM. But we had a thing where I tried to get a third one, and I have a picture, I think, on my Instagram. They literally send me, I think, 5 or 6 of the exact same tobacco one. Or I think I may have lost the headphones. Can you say something?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can. So there was a point where I had like 7 or 8 of these guitars in my studio, and I would do a playlist and record each one of them, and go back and forth to find one that sounded close to the 2 that I have. And there was one that I thought was great, and then I used it on the voice, and then I listened back on TV at home to broadcast, and I felt like it wasn't cutting through the mix. So I had them send another one, and then got that one. But they changed the design of the necks. So I had them made me a custom neck, which is even a little thicker than I like really big necks, kind of like 59 Les Paul and up. If you know about thicknesses,
yeah, sure.
Like 0.90 is the one I have. Like I think 59 is 860. So anyway, the third one that I have sounds a little different, but it's actually the best playing guitar that I own, because it's a custom neck that they made me. And for fly gigs, which I still do a lot of with Jesse McCartney. That's the only guitar I travel with, and it functions as a backup acoustic too. If something happens to my Taylor, I can just plug out of that. And so these guitars are really, really amazing. I know you ask about sleeper gear.
Yeah.
But this is really one of the best guitars ever.
At retail?
Yeah, not a lot at all. Brand new. This one is a AA top, even though it's really nice flame. Yeah. I think it's barely $1,800 or something. The AAA, my other one, is a AAA top, which is like maybe low 2000s. You can get them used for.
Model name called?
The model LGX SA. And the LGX, they have a tremolo one, but the body is made of maple. SA is like the bridge, Les Paul Tunematic bridge. And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing design. To me, that's probably this one. To me, that is the ultimate design. And the most important thing is it looks modern, but it sounds like a vintage guitar. I do not like modern guitars. If it was up to me, everyone would just play either a Les Paul or a Telecaster, period. And it sounds like that. It sounds super, the pickups are gorgeous, Seymour Duncan, vintage style sounding pickups. So a really, really amazing guitar. So that's that. And that's what I
Oh yeah, they got a tremolo version.
Yeah, but this one, the tremolo is because the woods are different. I think the back is maple or something like that's a Canadian maple. This one is the most traditional one.
I wonder how much these go for if they're like sleepers on Reverb. You know, like if
Cheap, super cheap. Like I think maybe you can get some for like $1,200.
let's see, it's gonna be the sleeper all in one.
Yeah, I mean, it's really they're incredible.
Let's see. Wow, there you go.
And there are a lot of them. And I remember I got to talk
What year is
to
yours? Because this might be the same. This might be the style that's more like yours. You know, not the change.
Yeah, but you know the new ones, the one that I actually use the most now is a newer one. The only thing is the neck is a little thinner, which some people actually most people prefer that.
Blue.
Yeah, actually, even though I'm really close with the company, I did go to a few guitar stores and stuff, because I keep feeling like the guitar that I let go, that I sent back after it didn't sound good on the voice, that maybe it could have been just the mix that day on broadcast, and then maybe I made a mistake and giving it back. So I'm so crazy that I tried to hunt for it a little, and it's funny because again I have all the guitars I need, but I have a passion for those guitars. I looked for the specific figuring of that top, and I thought I discovered it in some pawn shop, so I called them, but it was a different one. But I'm set. I have 3 of them now, which sound pretty different. But the blue one I think is the best sounding one. The brown one is a little more pretty mellow sounding, but still great. And the one I use now is a little thinner, a lot brighter, but the best playing. It literally plays itself. It's amazing, and I've done so many shows with it. I actually started doing fly dates with it because I felt like it was my 3rd favorite from those, so I didn't want to get them banged up. So if I'm sending stuff in the plane, but it just then fast forward a few years later, I've done probably like 150 gigs with it as my only guitar. There were really for me, it was a big part of my financial work during the last 4 years. And for Jesse, he's done it, kind of revived his career, that format of we have a show that's just the 2 of us. So that I really like having instruments where it's not necessarily always what you use in the studio, but you look at a guitar and you say, this guitar actually helped me feed my family, pay my mortgage. It's like a real tool that has your back, so that's definitely a guitar like that.
Yeah, it's like it's like a budget-friendly Dave Grissom guitar sort of thing, where it's
exactly. Yeah, and I have a Grissom. After I saw your interview, I have a Grissom that I used on The Voice, which is great too. And
what color?
I use it. Sorry.
What color is your Grissom?
It's white.
White. Okay. Cool.
I think it's a custom color because I actually Googled it literally after I watched your interview. I was curious because I wasn't sure if it has a maple top or not. It does, because you can see the binding is just a natural. But yeah, it's really cool. These, I think, what makes them even more, even though, yeah, I guess the David Grissom, do you know what scale it is? It's a little bit longer.
I don't know if it's a Gibson scale or not. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but these, because it's full on built like a Tele, and the shape is very similar. It's like, it's kind of like a Tele custom. Like people had that design where if you had just a mahogany maple Tele, you put great humbuckers. And for whatever reason, those Seymour Duncans split amazingly well. And by the way, another, that will take us a little bit later, but one major thing that happened to me on the Backstreet Boys tour, tonally, that was great, is that's when I realized that you are not allowed or supposed to ever play a clean sound on a pop gig without a compressor on. Like, it's wrong. Not allowed, because I never really got why to use compressors. And I just really, because at home, you can just, if you're in the studio or if you're someone like David Grissom, who's playing organic gigs that are amazing, and you really crank the amp so you can really control it and make it sing. On a lot of the pop gigs that I do, there's not, maybe it's just me, but I feel like most people that do what I do are the same way. You don't get that much dynamic variance. You have to have the sound be exactly what it is at the level you need it to be. You can't really you can't have the amp be too juicy and stuff. All the stuff you want it to do in the studio, it gets a little too out of control if you're doing it for the voice or for a tour and something like that, especially when you have to switch between sounds. So for me, I realized that if you're on a single, I would split the Godin to, single, either neck or bridge. And at the time I had a Boss compressor, which I don't use, but it worked for that, because every time, because Backstreet was all these iconic big riffs and stuff, and it worked great. Like, I listen if you YouTube that, there's Live at the O2 Arena, all those songs, and it's just one guitar, it's just me, and you can hear the acoustic and electric, and it's still, I think it's one of the best tones I've had. And I used 2 amps under the stage, a twin, which haven't used since, I don't know why, but an AC30, one of the the Vox Marshall made AC30s.
Yeah,
there was a time
mid-90s.
You know about those?
Yeah, I have one.
Yeah, exactly.
I have one in the showroom in Burbank.
Yeah. So I have 2 of them as well, we rented. I love those amps, so we just had 2, and the twin was just because why not? We just had it, and I went to both of them, cranked pretty loud, and we had it in stereo, and it sounded really good.
Nice.
So that's what I was doing on Backstreet.
Yeah, that Godin guitar I think is a good sleeper one to consider. That clearly it's a good choice.
Yeah, and again, that's the kind of thing for me. I always I don't know. It's always kind of like a battle between wanting to do you can't go wrong if you're playing a Tele or a Les Paul, and the Friedman or a Marshall or like a Bogner or something like that, or Divided by 13. That's what all the best players use, and it always sounds great. But for something about me, even though I want to be that person, and I love those people, and I actually only love those types of people, but something about me always kind of has to find a little bit more of a high-tech solution or something, to I figured, why not have a programmable multi-effect processor? If it sounds good. If I understand if it sounds horrible, but I don't want to dumb it down and just have 3 knobs controlling a digital thing. I want to be able to go and set the exact BPM of each song, especially when it's digital anyway, and then I'll have all my analog distortions. I want to have a guitar that has a split coil if it sounds good, and it's not. And I want to have a flat. You told me you flattened out the radius on your Paul Reed Smith, so the Godin has, by the way, a 16-inch radius, so it's super flat and wide. It's like a very, very comfortable guitar to play, and big frets. So to me, it just makes sense, and now at this point in my career, especially with the voice, part of the fun is to have a lot of different guitars there. So I don't use the Godin as much because I trade off between a Les Paul or my Fanos that we can talk about. That's the main thing I play. And my Teles, I use LSL and Bill Nash Teles and Strats, but I can just switch off, and it's fun and it's cool, and you have a lot of guitars. But if you told me for the rest of your life you can only play that Godin, done, shut up and just make music, I'll be totally fine with that.
Nice.
And sometimes I have fantasies about not having access to gear, because I feel like when I was younger and I had 2 guitars and that Mesa cab, my tone is at least as good as it is now, and I wouldn't think about it so much. When you have,
right.
We get greedy and we get all the gear, and in many ways it gets in the way of just making choices.
Yeah. So let's get into doing some of that, and maybe talk about what are some of your favorite pieces of gear that you like. We've talked about the guitars some, but let's get into some of the pedals. Can you tell me maybe some of your favorite, let's start with compressors. We were talking about it a little bit. You had the Boss. What are your favorite compressors to use now?
So the Boss, so basically the evolution was after Backstreet Boys. I got to do Colby Calais, which was a completely different vibe, which I was because up to that point, everything I did was very kind of polished pop, which I always joke that I play with Backstreet Boys like I'm playing either in probably in Def Leppard is a good reference. You're playing like pop metal, and they love that stuff. But then Colby is, I always like to kind of imagine who I am for their band, even if you're a session guy. So for Colby, I imagine I'm Mark Knopfler or John Mayer. That was kind of the vibe, which that's very big. Obviously, as a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan and Dire Straits fan, David Gilmour, that's a big side of me. And I think that's why I got the Colby gig as well, because I came in with I'll actually show you, and we'll talk about the pedals too.
Yeah, sure.
This is the first really amazing guitar I had, I think, after the Godin, and I bought it at Mesa Boogie Hollywood. It's a Bill Nash Strat, and I actually have to thank Jared Scharf also for it, because he had the first Nash and the first Fano, both of which he always teases me. Main things I play, now 99% of the time is, if it's acoustics live, it's Taylor guitars, but electric, it's Fano guitars and Nash and my Les Pauls. But I just went to Mesa Boogie and said I want to buy a Strat, and they had probably 6 Nashes, and we just went through all of them, and I asked the guys there, who are amazing and great players too, the people that work there. So they just played, I closed my eyes, because sometimes when you play a guitar, it's hard to see what it really sounds like, because you're influenced by the way it vibrates, which is good. But you also, if you just want to hear it tonally, it's good to have someone else play it for you. So, and this was the winner, and this is just an insane guitar, and it's a standard Nash that he does with Lawler pickups. That I'm friends with Bill Nash, so he had me. Jason Lawler makes custom kind of, it's a standard set. I think it's the blonde set or whatever, but he makes a specific thing for Bill Nash, and so Bill Nash sold me a few sets of pickups exactly like what go to his guitars for me to put in my other backup Strat and stuff. But anyway, so with Colby, so then after 2010-ish, this basically was the guitar up to that made that fed my family. Just got married, and this was a guitar that I use only. On the Colby stuff, I would just have this guitar and a backup Strat, and then that's the first time that I didn't have a multi-effects processor, because again, that's way more organic. So I used, at the time, I had some custom compressor that a guy in Israel made, but then I switched quickly to the JHS, the orange squeeze, I think it's called, or orange peel. That one that has a wet dry thing. I used that for a little bit, but then after that, and for the last 8 years, and it's the same for Justin and Dave Barry, who plays on the voice as well. It's the Ego the Wampler Ego compressor, which I love. I put it kind of 50-50 dry and wet, and I've never have a clean sound. You've never heard me play a clean sound since 2008 that doesn't have a compressor on, live. And
we had to try the Nile, because we converted Justin on that one.
I know. Yeah. I mean, there's so much of your stuff that I really need to check out. I know. And the Wampler, it's, but just, I think any compressor that has high fidelity and has the mix knob, that's already going to get you very close. And I always think of compression as distortion for clean. You know what I mean? That's like your distortion. You still sound clean, but all of a sudden you can hear it. Yeah. And so I use that, and I also have so it's almost all the time the Ego, but then for the shows, for my fly dates, I use the exotic SP compressor, which is small, but it also sounds really good. It's a little less tweakable than the Ego, but it sounds great. And I can actually show you my flight rig. That's another thing that I do that's kind of like no one else does, and just to make it's a little embarrassing, but it's cool. I made this thing. It goes in the case, and that's it's my pedal board. I didn't want to carry a pedal board, so I set up a thing so it all goes in the guitar case. So I get to gig. Here, I'll show you. Basically, you go like this. I put my whole board together like this. 2 of them, you see, and then and it all fits. And people always get a kick out of it, but it's killer. It's just so for all the fly dates, I have this is another sleeper pedal we can talk about, the Jekyll and Hyde V3 True Tone. Yeah. But so I go, which is 2 overdrives. So I go to the compressor, Boss Tuner, SP compressor, Jekyll and Hyde, and then I have these 2. It's the Digitech. I don't know if it's the same algorithms as the old Hardwire stuff.
It's similar,
but it's crazy. Actually, I'm friendly. A lot of companies, I don't have exclusivity with any one company, but because I'm fortunate to do a lot of TV work and stuff, you do get a lot of gear from companies wanting to check it out. And I remember I was actually at NAMM, and he just the artist rep just said, "Hey, take a few pedals," and he just gave me a box, and so I got this and that one. That's the delay and the reverb, and they're amazing.
Yeah, they're great. Yeah, they're fantastic.
Yeah. And so what happens is my little flight rig, which is just these things on that. Often I plug in, and I always backline something like either a 30 or 50 watt, either like a Fender Deluxe or maybe a Mesa F50, something like that. And it sounds exactly as good as all my big stuff on the voice, because just you have a few without Godin, and you have a really good compressor and a good overdrive, and the delay actually also makes a difference. And I have the mini Dunlop volume pedal, and I'm so happy with it. You know, it sounds so immediate and punchy, even though we travel without our own sound people and everything. So that's something that I feel like that's a really fun flight rig, you know.
Nice. What about for boost? What do you like to use?
So for boost, I use, and it's another, maybe it's a little bit of a sleeper. I went through. But I mean, the short answer is it's the Mesa Tone Burst is what I now use.
All right.
Do you know that? And
Yeah.
I had the the exotic RC booster, which is great, the white one. Then I have the exotic EP booster, which is cool, and I still use the EP booster as well. But basically a few years ago, the way I got the voice, I jumped in the middle of a season. Justin was away. And I don't know if you know Rafael Moreira, Rafa, who's one of the best guitar players in the whole world. So Paul Mirkovich, our musical director, really only kind of worked in the last 3 decades with 3 guitar players, with Rafael, with Justin, and with Dave Barry, who's an amazing guitar player and did all the Janet Jackson stuff. And Rafael did Pink before Justin did that. And then when Paul got Rockstar, Supernova and Rockstar in Excess, that was a TV show. And the band was exactly like the band from The Voice, only it had Rafael instead of Justin. And then when Justin went on tour with Pink, Rafael did it for a while, but then he couldn't stay. He had to go to his family in Brazil, and so there was something where he wasn't able to finish the season. So I got called, and that was a call. That was what before we started. That was the life-changing call that actually did come out of the blue, from Paul asking if I can start doing the Voice. And that was the phone call that really made my last 10 years. That's been most in my 30s. That's most of what I've done, even though my job is to fill in for Justin or Dave. But it's still, Pinko's on the road so much. And then there's so much stuff going on in the show that it's really been keeping me working, and making a living, even just as I always joke that I'm the 3rd luckiest person after Justin and Dave. But that's been cool, and I've done a lot of stuff through that directly for NBC and the show, and we've done some stuff, all 3 of us, in the same season where Justin and Dave are there, but I go do all prep stuff with we just did in the past season, like at John Legend's house with contestants playing acoustic stuff. So it kind of I was embraced as part of the family. So it's really amazing. And obviously working with Justin and stuff, and everyone is so cool on the show. But the way I started doing it, there was not a lot of notice. So I basically pieced together everything I had to start the gig. And actually, it's coming back to me now. I forgot about it, but I was so terrified when because it was literally to start this week. And I didn't have time to prep at all. And I told myself, you idiot, you don't have a proper rig. You're always using this stuff you put together. Like, this is the big league. Even though with Colby Calais, I was using my British Voxes, which are amazing still, but it was specific. It wasn't the most versatile thing. It was for Backstreet. And I said, what are you going to do? You can't show up with your shitty gear, which is not shitty again, but you know what I mean. There's Justin has his mega Friedman and Wagner and all the switching stuff. So that night when I got the call and I was supposed to start the next day, I went on Craigslist and looked for divided by 13s. Lyle Workman?
Yeah, sure.
Who's one of the most. I got to I'm not friendly with him, but I met him a few times and we got to email a few times. He's a super nice guy, but he's like one of the best guitar players I think alive. He's amazing, and I know he uses a divided by 13. So I said, just get it divided. And someone was selling, but the AC30 version, not the Fender version. I forget what it's called, the RCA 31.
Yeah.
But so someone was selling that literally the night before I'm about to start The Voice, and but I said I can't show up with unprofessional gear, and so I went over and I bought that thing and borrowed my brother-in-law's car because it came with road cases and an SUV, and then I came home and I plugged it, I turned it on, and I said, "There's no way I can use it." It was so loud, and you could not get a clean sound out of it. It sounded amazing, but it's not what I needed. And I actually called the guy. and asked if I can. It was a few days later. I said if I can give it, if he will take it back, and he was really nice. And he went to music school too, and he knew who I was from the Backstreet Boys stuff. A lot of guys go to music school, they want to be like session guys who succeeded. So he was actually, I think he even asked me like to sign the amp, and he gave me my money back. I gave him like $300 or $200 for his trouble for taking it back. But I didn't have a proper rig. I didn't know what to use in the beginning. But then a few years ago, and that's what you do all day long, I had that experience that I said, I had some time off from the voice, and I said, instead of really not knowing what all the variables are in my rig, I'm going to tear everything apart and really build it and take every component and really test it to really see what's going on. Because I felt like I was losing a lot of fidelity and punch and top end. Like something was not, when I was playing on my fly rig, everything was very immediate, and the voice. And again, there's a lot of X factors because you don't know exactly what's happening in the processing by the time it gets to your in-ears.
Right.
But I said, I really want to make sure that nothing is damaging my signal in any way. And I went on a quest where every single pedal, I started testing like a maniac, so it started with buffers, and I got everything, and I put buffers on loops on a true bypass switcher. And I like fed white noise to it and clicked the buffer in and out to see if it changes the tone, because some of them it'll be like as soon as you turn it on. So obviously it's changing the frequency response. And I settled on the Mesa, the high wire, you know that one? And
yeah, it's the only commercial buffer that I've been recommending for
the
last several years. Yeah, I mean, of those that are commercially available, I think it's
I'm happy to hear.
It's math, man. With buffers, it's really math. It's like if it's not hitting a certain input and output impedance, it's doing the true job of a buffer, which is there's no change. You bring it in and out there. There's no tone change between a 10-foot cord into your amplifier.
And I did those tests, and I'm happy to say that because I know sometimes. For commercially available products, some people who build rigs and stuff, they have a hard time recommending that stuff. But for me, to my ears, that was definitely a gigantic improvement in my rig. And I have two of them. I have the smaller one in my studio, and I have the big one that has an output buffer, which I don't use. I just actually use it as an input buffer. But I had that sorted then. And I also, by the way, I use... Sorry?
You should use the output buffer.
I know, yeah. But at the time, it just felt like... I know I should. I planned on doing it, but it just the way my signal is routed, I just came out of the volume pedal, and it felt like robust enough by the time it came out of it. But I use the RJM switchers, the mini effect gizmos, but they have a buffer and not a buffer as well. And I think I'm not using their buffer. I'm just using the Mesa one. But anyway, I basically did a shootout for every single component, for the compressors, for the reverbs, for the phasers, for the overdrives, and that made a gigantic difference in my sound. On all the stuff I've done on the voice last, I think 5 years now, has been way more punchy and clear and stuff like that. And so I think the stuff, what you're about to ask is stuff that I settled on. So the Mesa Boogie, you're asking about a clean boost, the tone burst, I love it. I always have it on. And
the Mesa Boogie tone burst.
Yeah. And I just basically leave everything at noon. What I discovered is, and again, it's kind of stuff where you never really know. I don't know why. I think some players, if they have their sound and that's what they do, like David Grissom that you talked to, he's an amazing artist as a guitar player. So he really is so familiar with what he's doing. For me, that side of gear and playing is really just in my studio. But every time I go do a gig, you kind of have to rediscover a little bit what works and what doesn't, especially on the voice where you don't know how it's going to translate coming out of a Panasonic, like an LG TV with speakers. Right. And that's the reference we use. And we do that all the time, especially Dave Barry and myself. If I'm doing a season with him, we're always playing really kind of not knowing how it's going to sound. It's funny, even after doing it for almost a decade, they've been doing it for more than a decade. We play and we'll talk and he tells me, I just cranked my tone knob, on an overdrive or something a little bit more. Let's see what it sounds like today when we get the recordings. And then we'll text after. He's like, did you hear that part? Was it a little too bright? Was it not? because we're always basically throwing stuff and seeing what comes out, because it's never, you don't have full control of how it's gonna turn out. And rule of thumb, that's something of an advice. If I haven't made every single viewer and listener fall asleep, if I was listening to this podcast, I think I would hope that I would enjoy it, because getting nerdy. But a big thing for me, when you do these types of gigs, is actually go brighter and brighter and brighter and punchier, because it's that's really what the guitar is for. And it's not, again, by the time it gets mixed, it's not really going to be competing with cymbals and stuff like that, like super high 10K and stuff. You need stuff to cut through. And I think almost all the tones that we love, if you listen, actually, I remember hearing you did a shootout for the Mark Knopfler thing with Mason Stoops. Yeah, it was, Mason is a buddy of mine too, and he's amazing. And then I think you played the solo track, and what struck me watching that is that all the classic albums that we love, if you listen to the solo tracks, anything, Van Halen, Queen, Dire Straits, it's way more kind of bright and ratty and kind of rough than what we think. The stuff, if we listen to stuff solo, we want to make it a little bit prettier, but by the time it's a track, it doesn't have that same ferocity.
Yeah.
So it's good. You listen to those tones, they need to be a little rude and rough and raw, so I've been going more and more just kind of cranking treble. Jared, by the way, Jared Scharf, on his rig on SNL, he has this amp, the Monterey, the 65 amps.
Yep.
And I think his treble is like full on 12, and a lot of people crank treble all the way in amps like that. For me, I use Bad Cats, so it doesn't even have an equalizer, it just has a tone control. But yeah, I try to generally get stuff sounding brighter. So basically what I learned about the clean boost is if a clean sound, the way my amp is set up, if I just go from the guitar into the amp, but bypassing everything in my board, it just doesn't translate. So my clean sound actually has two gain pedals. Basically, it's always going through the Wampler, mild compression, like almost everything is basically a noon, and that's going to the Mesa, to the tone burst, and that's my clean sound, and it's still clean. But if I take it off, I lose probably 50% of the volume. Sometimes I forget, and you play it and there's no tone, and then I engage it. So I think, and I don't crank my amp very much in that setting, but basically I'm hitting the amp pretty hard, so, and that's something.
What about for drive? What have you kind of settled on?
So drive, I have, that I did a ton of testing, because it's really easy to get a good overdrive sound or a boost, but getting a super high gain sound is something that was always elusive, that I was never able to get really good, with a pedal. But then I've used, when I started the voice, I used the Jetter pedals, which are great, and
yep.
I still have some on my board. But that's more of kind of not bright at all, like more mid-rangey, and it's great for a lot of country stuff. So I still have that. I have my Boss OD3 as my lifesaver, with the gain actually almost all the way off, but it still has a lot of gain, because I do hit it with the boost or the compressors because I can program my board.
Right.
I can do that, and that is the go-to rock and roll sound that really translates as well. And again, it's not a boutique pedal, so it's not the most responsive. It imparts a very strong tone of its own, where you kind of maybe lose some nuances of guitars, but it's fine. If you need to get, I wouldn't use it in the studio ever, because you want to have the purest, most beautiful, articulate sound. But if you're getting paid, you want to cut through the mix, you want to sound badass, and not metal. You want to sound like a really cool, like Rage Against the Machine, Red Hot Chili Peppers, basically just really be heard and have class while you do it, sound really high quality. It's a great pedal to have. So that's in one loop. And then where I was really struggling is with the high gain stuff. So I used to use the Maxon or Ibanez. Remember the Tube King? You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Those were old ones. And I had one that I used to use for years. I think that's what I used on Backstreet Boys. And then it went out. So I got a Maxon that didn't sound as good. So I actually took the tube from my old one, put it in the Maxon, and it sounded the same, which is interesting, because a lot of people say that the tube doesn't make that much of a difference because it's running at low voltage, but it did. Like, it really actually affected the sound. So I used to use that. Then Now what I sold on for flight dates, I use this guy, which is incredible. It's really and I've had all iterations of it, the V1, V2, and V3.
Yeah.
But the high gain side
It's the
on
most
this,
normal shape that's ever been. Some of the older ones are weird, look like a baseball diamond.
Exactly, yeah, and I have all those. And I used to use that on Backstreet as well, but this one is just amazing because it has everything you want. It has a dedicated bass, mid, and high, and treble control on the high gain. And these two switches are so drastic. It's the most drastic difference I've ever heard in a pedal. It's like completely nuts. And as far as the gain structure, the volume, and the high end, and I don't know even exactly what they do, but one sounds like it has like a low pass filter. It's way darker. It's still bright, but the other one. But what's cool about it is there's no amp on the planet that you can throw at it that you're not going to be able to make it work with that amp. You know, like basically every amp you just plug it into, you go voice A or B, and right away you know, oh, it's definitely that one because the other one just sounds completely unusable. But it changes. You know, if you're using a Vox or a Mesa or whatever.
Right.
And I don't even know which is which. It's funny because it's every time I get to a fly date, if it's usually it's a deluxe reverb, I just go, oh yeah, that's the one. And then brightness is a mega switch, and then from there you can still tweak the top end with a treble. And this sounds literally, I mean, it sounds like kind of like a Friedman or a Marshall or whatever. It's high gain and it's amazing, and I love this pedal. I don't use it on the voice because I think within the context of my rig, where there's it's amazing. I mean, and by the way, and the low gain side of it is just as good. My only problem, I wish the volume was a little bit similar, because to get the volumes roughly equal, you have to crank the high gain side here. You see almost like 10, and the low gain almost at 0, because the low gain side is much more of kind of a full clean boost tube screamer with not tube screamer, but like kind of like a boutique full range mid, and it has a clean mix as well, but it's a completely different sound. They sound like different brands, you know, which is a good thing, because then I have this as a light kind of more soulful overdrive that I use with single coils if I'm splitting it on my Godin, and then anytime I need to go to like the metal mode or you know, or rock stuff, which on pop gigs, that's what it is, I go to the other side. And a little cool thing that I don't use, but if someone needs it, they actually, the default is that it has an in and an out, but you can actually access each pedal with its own output. So if you had a looper
or something, yeah,
you can basically put in a looper.
Nice.
So this is an incredible pedal. And
hold on just a second. I think my dog's got to pee. He keeps scratching at the floor, so let him out. But
yeah.
Come on, we're going this way. Come on. Come on. Let's go potty. Let's go potty. Come on. All right.
Yeah. So basically that's the high gain for flight dates. And then what I settled on, and I actually feel like finally, and that came again, it came from being in my studio. It looked like junkyard, you know, the whole floor was covered with pedals. I can show you, by the way. Here, this is like my I built a vertical pedal board. You see, so that's kind of stuff I use to record. And then you see that cabinet over there in the distance under the AC here? That's all pedals. You see that?
Yeah, I do.
So I took out all my stuff and really experimented, and I discovered by chance there was like a magic combination with the Sir. Do you know the Sir Eclipse pedal? It's the red one. Which John Sir's son designed, actually. And so I got that one, but I discovered, but I don't know how, I was just kind of clicking stuff using that and the Boss OD3 together. That is the most amazing aggressive bitey tone, like if you want a really high gain, you know, kind of like a Friedman, that kind of vibe. And but both of them have the gain very low. Like the Boss is, again, the gain is almost at 0, but it adds just like, you know, like toothiness and kind of a mid-range.
This one here, the Eclipse.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I actually keep the gain on that one probably like around 11 o'clock something.
Right.
It's so low, but it's getting kicked by the boss.
Right.
And the combination of the two of them, as soon as I hit it, I remember I sent, like took a video of the pedal and showed it. I sent it up to a bunch of my friends, like, check it out, because I remember feeling the Eclipse made the sound like this, and then the boss pushes, like, tucks everything in and tightens it up, and that's been my sound on the Voice. And it's the first time that I feel like I have a high gain sound that sounds totally as good as any amp. I don't, because I still, and I have the Friedman, and I just, for whatever reason, I don't know why, I just I didn't want to start going into the effects loop and everything. And the Bad Cat is a little more of a classic design, so I just go into the clean channel of the Bad Cat. And what I have on my board, I have 5 overdrive pedals, which I can click in different combinations. So my number, and I basically have my presets 1 to 5, and as far as gain, and my number 5 is the Eclipse with the Boss together, and it's an amazing sound.
Nice.
And, yeah, and especially, again, by the time you hear it on TV, you would never know if it's not a real amp, and I think just maybe having the architecture of just having 2 different brands and 2 different circuit philosophies, the Boss and the Sir together, adds a little bit to the complexity. It's like, it's not something that someone could plan for, but it just makes up for not being tubes and stuff. There's just a little bit more stuff happening there harmonically,
What about for modulation stuff? What do you gravitate toward?
So modulation, I use my favorite pedal of that's a big life-changing pedal is the Strymon Flint.
Okay.
Because again, I used to use the M9 for years. After weaning myself off the multi-effect thing, I had the M9.
Okay.
And it was great. It does everything I needed to. But for some reason, even though I have seen people use the tremolo and it sounded great, but for whatever reason, I wasn't able to make the tremolo really speak, and cut through. And as soon as I got the Strymon, it just mostly for the tremolo, something about it really, really translates well in a recording. Like by the time it gets through the microphone, and especially on the Voice, because I would say if you had to say what I have to do, and basically think of all the gigs that you have, the full range of gigs available for a guitar player. You're probably not gonna. I mean, it would be amazing. I would love to be on the Alice Cooper gig, but it's not. I don't have hair for that. I should get a wig, but and that's still kind of like a hired gun gig, But most of the spectrum of the stuff you get falls either to the kind of pop stuff, which is like Justin McCartney, Justin Bieber, even Backstreet Boys, Katy Perry, all that stuff. And there's the kind of more organic stuff that you can do, like Colby and that kind of stuff. But the basically the tones, if you have to think about what the tones that translate across the boards is, you need a beautiful clean sound that's either a Tele or a Strat. I personally, even because I think I grew up being a Strat guy, I don't like playing Strats at all anymore. I do enjoy some players that play Strats, but I feel like it's just better to play a Tele if you're going to play a Strat. So I think maybe it has some associations with me with, growing up, and a lot of people abuse the Strat tone. I still love when I hear John Mayer or Mark Knopfler, it's the best tone ever. But when I hear trying to do their stuff and they're on the 4th pickup position and it's bright and nasally and honky and they're playing funk on a Strat, I think it's just better to go Prince, and do like a Tele. So yeah, you have a Tele with reverb and tremolo, that's going to get you through most gigs. Like if you're talking about what are you gonna, if you want a career in music as a guitar player, that's the tone you have, and you can take off the tremolo, but you still need a reverb. And that's another thing that when I was a kid I didn't realize, that all the sounds that I like, all the tones that I love, they have a ton of reverb, and people, spring reverb, my personal style. But you feel, I remember hearing a story about Pat Metheny playing in Berkeley, and he would get the side of the amp that doesn't have reverb. But, and that scared me, like, oh, we're playing without reverb. But you're really not supposed to play without reverb unless you're playing funk or something like that. If you're playing beautiful, clean tones, you need to have a spring reverb sound, because electric guitar is a guitar that doesn't have an acoustic property in the room. Like a piano sounds beautiful. It has a sustain pedal. Right. There's a lot of stuff there. A guitar just needs it. For an electric guitar to sound natural, it actually needs to be processed. That's a paradox, like you're trying to make stuff sound natural by adding stuff to it, because otherwise it just sounds dead or in a vacuum. So Flint is basically one-stop shop, gets you there. You can sound beautiful, you know. And unfortunately, I didn't have it on the Colby Calais stuff. I had a different spring reverb pedal, but on the voice, really giant. I can't tell you a number, but I would say like, you know, 40-50% of what we play is a Flint. The three of us, Justin, Dave, and myself, and we always text each other. Like if I'm not doing a season and Justin is doing it, he's playing Chanks, you know, like kind of 60s, but you know, from you really hear the reverb tail, and I always text him. He's like, "Is that the Flint or something else?" And it's always Flint. So that's a major pedal to have, and I have two of them, you know, and it's everything you need in one. And it gives you the confidence to play clean tone, because a lot of times it's scary and you feel kind of exposed and you don't have the power to play clean versus distortion. But you have a nice compressor and a clean boost and a Flint, all of a sudden you don't have to play as loud, you don't have to play as much, and everything blooms and you can kind of fill the space playing clean. So that's a crucial pedal. And I will mention, even though you asked me about modulation, but just we'll or actually no, we'll come back to reverbs. Modulation, so that's the Flint, the trem. I don't really use a lot of chorus ever, but I got the Wazacraft, the Dimension C, and the chorus, which sounds killer because it still has that vintage thing. But I am a giant fan of vibrato, of the, you know, the Boss VB2, which I never had. Now I finally got the Wazacraft. It sounds amazing. But there's another pedal. I actually put it here, and that's a sleeper pedal too. I wonder if you know this one, because I feel like it's a sleeper, but some people do. Do you know this guy?
Mindbender.
Yeah.
DB.
Yeah, that's an amazing pedal. I think I have 3 or 4 of them, so I don't mind the secret being out. And I think I got them free from them, but I got a few on eBay for like $40, $30.
Yeah,
people don't know.
Here it is.
Yeah,
this one for $65 mint.
Yeah, and and I have one with a different design, and it's actually designed, I think, by Will Ray from the Helicasters. You know him?
Yeah, I do know Will Ray.
Yeah, so what it is, it's
I see Will Ray. Yeah.
And it's 2 pedals. Basically, you have on off, and you have 2 complete different modes. One is the Boss VB2, and the other one is the way huge. What is it called? The chorus that they make. Oh, the Rhino. No, what is it called?
Oh, the Blue Hippo.
Exactly, the Blue Hippo. So that's what in my side. But what's interesting is it doesn't sound like the VB2. What it is, I didn't realize. I always remember thinking, how can it modulate the pitch if it's an analog thing? And what it is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's actually, the whole thing is going through basically an analog delay, which is changing the pitch, because there's no way. I think that's what's going on here. It's like a Bucket Brigade thing.
Yeah, it's definitely Bucket Brigade. But I don't know. I mean, when did this come out? Because I guess the original Blue Hippo would have come out in the late 90s, but that was just a CE2 kind of.
Yeah, so that's one side. That's the chorus, and then but you switch to basically the main difference between the vibrato and the chorus is the vibrato takes out the dry signal, so all you're getting is the wet, and you hear the pitch modulate. But what's interesting about this is it completely alters your tone when you click it on. It sounds basically like your whole signal is the tone of what you would get kind of out of an analog delay,
right?
But not so mushy, like very processed, but very beautiful and organic. You know, it just sounds amazing, and it feels like there's a little bit of a latency, which is weird, but it's a magic pedal. It sounds amazing, and actually A/B'd it with a lot of different other brands before I got the VB2. Now I have the VB2 in the loop, and it's killer. And the VB2 is more hi-fi, more responsive, and you can do cool things with it, like making it momentary. You know, so you can basically use it like a fake vibrato. You can hit a chord and press it, and then it vibrates it. But this is an amazing pedal. And
Does it have the feature of the VB2 with the latch?
No, it doesn't. Okay. It just has on-off, but it's killer. So, and also it has a little bit. It's like a very healthy gain. I don't know if it boosts, but some other ones I tried, kind of you lose your gain a little bit. This one, you click it on, and it works great. So so I do have that even on the voice board. I don't know if I use it often, but I have it on there in case I need like an analog chorus or a vibrato sound. I did have the VB2 for a long time on the voice as well, but use that. And then I have phaser wise, I did a major shootout. I'm friends with, I don't know if you know Brian Kehoe from Dunlop.
Right.
He's a good buddy of mine. So I actually went to Sam Ash, which I haven't done in years, and had them bring out all their phasers, all their reverbs, and just A-B'd from one pedal to the next. Because a lot of times it's really hard to know how good something is if you don't have immediate feedback to compare it to something else. Especially, by the way, with reverbs, I noticed that because a lot of reverbs sounded great, but there are a few of them actually I settled on Cattle and Bread. They have the Talisman, which is a plate.
Yep.
And you just hear there's just more stuff going on in the tone. It's just, you feel it's like a visual thing, you know, you imagine the space. And it was very, and if I had had not A-B'd stuff, I wouldn't be able to know how good it was, because all the reverbs sound good, you know, almost any reverb sounds pretty good when you kick it on. But I settled on that one, and I also have, which I think is maybe even a little bit better than the Flint, but I still haven't put it on my board. It's the Source Audio True Spring. Do you know that one?
No, they're excellent.
Yeah, so that's what John Mayer also uses, and so I have that one. That's amazing. But
he uses it sometimes. You know, it depends. That's
I saw it on his board, but yeah, that actually people don't realize. I think that it's like a full functioning Flint, because it has a foot switchable tremolo in there as well.
Yeah,
and it's tiny, and I have that extra little control thing. I figured if I ever wanted to for my fly rig, I'll use that, but because I have the Flint, so because I have the Flint already, it's in my studio board, not in my voice board, and I have the Talisman if I need a different. Basically, the way I program stuff on the voice, a lot of times you have to take solos, and I don't know if Justin went over this, but basically we have our stations, and then whenever you see us on camera, we're walking about 10, 15 feet in front of our rig to be on camera. Yeah, it's True Spring. Yeah. So basically you have to be away from your rig. Whenever you're on camera, you're not standing next to your rig. So we need to have our techs make preset change for us. But my go-to...
You said there's a tremolo feature to this?
Yeah.
Where is the control?
So you see there's a button in the back.
Okay, yeah, I see.
So if you hold that, it's funny actually that you asked us. Check this out. I was just cleaning out my studio. Where is it? Here. Look. See how dorky I am? That's the.
Oh.
They'll be very happy that you see. And it has, because when you press that button, it changes the functionality. So what the reverb controls become the tremolo controls.
Got it. Depth.
But it's pretty intuitive. You just hold. Basically, you're doing tremolo depth. You just hold the thing and you change it, and you have that little extra foot switch. So it's a really cool alternative.
Yeah.
Flint, they want a smaller size. And it has a master volume on it. It's a really cool pedal, and the reverb is amazing. It sounds it's very noticeable. You know, you can really hear it.
Now, you were mentioning something about Brian Kehoe though, and doing a phaser shootout.
So I tested all the Phase 90s basically, and he made fun of me at the end. I ended up getting 3. I got the best sounding one was, sure enough, and there was a real difference. It was interesting. I was able for the first time to hear the difference between the block logo and script logo and stuff like that. You know, the block logo is a little more gainy. It felt like that's a Van Halen one, but it was a little kind of more aggressive. But they have one that's the handmade, the hand wired, no power supply. It is true bypass, but no power supply. So that one that was the best sounding one. So I wanted to have that because I don't think I've used it since, but I wanted to have that, you know, in my fantasy of being like David Gilmour, you know. I said so is that that's the hand wired?
Hand wired, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a good price for it. Yeah. So I got that one, and then I got the one tier below that, which is the vintage script logo, but it has a power supply, which is very close to this. So that's kind of the one I got. But then surprisingly the mini one, the 95, you know the little guy.
This is the other one here, like this style one.
That's the other one I got, and basically as a workhorse. But what I've been using on the voice is the Phase 95.
The miniature one.
It's a miniature one, which by the way, what's interesting, again, it's a lot brighter sounding. you can just tell by as soon as you turn it on, you even get a little kind of like a hiss, not in a bothersome way, but you just tell it there's more high frequency going through the pedal. But that one is great, and I have that on my board, and it's small. And then if I don't always use, but if we're doing funk stuff or I need to do something fun, it's really versatile, and you have the two sounds. So I got all three, but I've been using the 95 on the board, and those are the main modulation things I do. I have also I have an H9, the Eventide on my board, which I use for Leslie. And it's funny, I haven't gotten into to programming, to switching it. But my board does have, I put together, but I do have MIDI going into the units. But in the heat of the battle, I don't know, with the H9, I don't program it a ton. So I have a few different sounds. I have it's similar to the Dimension, the detuner, the Eventide detuner, and the Leslie, which actually sent the preset to Dave Barry as well. And that's what he uses for Leslie. And with the OD3, with the Boss as well, there's something nice that happens with them. H9 for all my Leslie sounds. And this actually was a great lifesaver for the voice as well, the Helix, the mini guy. And that's something that I always wanted to have since I was young, doing the whole multi-effect thing, because I never wanted a big thing. And I didn't understand why the small ones don't let you actually go in. They're trying to market it to people that kind of are anti-digital, but for me, it's a digital pedal. So just let me tweak what I need to do. And what's so cool about this really made my life on the voice a lot easier. I have it on my board; it barely takes up any space. I have a bunch of Strymon and Boss stuff, the DD500 as well. But basically, I just any time there's a sound that needs to have anything that's time-based, a delay or something crazy, which there's a lot of stuff on the voice. Trying to copy a sound from a record where it's like a filtered thing, like a telephony sounding guitar with a giant reverb. I just go in, I build the complete signal chain exactly in here. I just pick which one of my analog gain pedals I want. This has a master volume digitally control here as well. If you need, you have all the EQs. You can really tailor it to fit. You name it with the song name and the part. And then I just trigger it from my Mastermind controller, from the RJM. And so that really saves my butt, because you can really quickly program stuff. You have your sound, you don't have to think about it. You just make a note what preset it's going to be. So that's something really cool. So I wouldn't use it. The delays, everything sounds really good on it, but I use also my Strymon, my not time factor, timeline. Yeah, so I use timeline for most stuff, but if I need to have a one-stop shop where it's like a boost for a solo, I have this, I make this the delay and maybe a reverb and maybe like a mid boost and a volume boost. So as soon as I click it, I'm in solo mode, and my tech only has to press one button to get me into solo mode, when I'm not next to my rig and I'm on camera and I have to take big. So that's a really nice thing. And again, you can A/B it to stuff, and it probably won't be able to match every single pedal and what they do as a specialist, but if you're in a time crunch and you need something that works, it's nice. And I also take it as a backup rig, basically, when I do fly dates. So if something goes down with an amp, you can just plug into the PA with this, and it can work. And I also got this little guy for it from Mission Engineering. Yeah. So basically, it's a tiny rig, but it's expanded. You have 5 pedals, and you can do cool things with this. You can either have it be 2 extra stomp switches, or you can have be stomp switches, but this go bank up and down, or preset up and down. So it's really cool. So basically, you're scrolling through your presets, and you still have individual control over the effects. So so that's modulation, and reverb. We touched on that as well.
Okay, what about for delays? You talked about the timeline. Is there anything else that you like using?
Yeah. So the delay out a lot of shootouts. I love the Boss DD 500. I use that in the studio as well. But on the Boss side, I do love the Waza DM2. Excuse my legs. Like a news anchor with it's the first time I'm seen without a hat and with shorts. My kids always say, I have young kids, and they say, you don't have any hair on your head, but you have a lot on your arms and legs. But
you did a transplant.
Yeah, exactly. If only that. I think it's the same. Studies show it's the same testosterone that makes you grow hair on your chest and lose your hair on the head. Seriously.
Really?
But anyway, so I've been using So I always like to have whatever I have, whether it's a line 6 or a Strymon or a Boss. I like to have an analog delay on the board. And for a very long time, I had the Aquapus, big one. It's this guy here.
Yeah.
Which has a super gnarly sound. I don't know if you've ever. It's the kind of thing where I use it because I knew it's like a classic design, of an analog delay, and I would use it. And I love how limited it is, also because basically there are only two ways you can use it. Either as a slapback mode, when the time is almost off, or you put it on maximum time and it's still very short. It's only like 200 milliseconds. But that becomes a really nice for basically general purpose soloing and playing parts. So basically I'm either on like 9 o'clock or all the way up,
Yeah.
And so I had that for a long time, but then I listened to it and it sounds very funny when you listen to the sound of the delay. But that's the way it's supposed to be. It sounds almost like a broken, like a broken computer or something. You know what I'm talking about? It has a very kind of distorted, cool sound and very bright, actually. So that's cool. The Boss one is way smoother, the tonality of the delay itself, the DM2. And I also, I used to use the big Maxon, the
89 or 900.
Yeah, like the big series that they have. I used to use that for a long time, but now that's basically so it's a combination. I use mostly, I would say, the Strymon, the Boss analog, and the line 6 if I need something specific time based. And I do actually use a lot of presets in the Strymon and the timeline. I do like that.
Yeah.
The way I set up my board is I basically have one of those MIDI solutions, 1 in 4 out for MIDI.
Mm-hmm.
And the Masterman, I have the old school one, it just has an LED. It doesn't have, you can't write presets, it just has numbers, but it's cool because basically I have 4 MIDI channels and I can control my H9, my line 6, and my Strymon, and my loop, the effect gizmos, the RJM. So I'm pretty quickly, I can just program presets. And the nice thing, if it was a tour, it would probably be better to have the preset names and everything, but because the voice comes and goes so quickly, I basically just make, you never have to play a song for more than 4 or 5 days because you learn it 4 days before broadcast. So it's so nuts. So you just basically program all your presets. I make sure to have a note on my chart of what preset it is, or 3. Usually if there's 1 preset, there's going to be 3 presets, because I'm already locked into BPM, to tempo. And then I just make notes of the sounds. A lot of songs don't need presets at all because it's either just like a classic AC/DC rock sound or tremolo. So that's like kind of my basic 5 presets, cover that, and I can click stuff in and out. But then I just get through the show, and on the day of the show, I literally write in a pencil on the set list of the show what presets I need to use. I go over everything and use highlighters and stuff. And 7:30 we finish the broadcast. I say, hopefully, thank God that we made it through and the show, because it's very, very frightening and high pressure.
Yeah.
And I tear the page and never think about those presets again, which is nice. So
nice.
Mm-hmm.
What about for amplifiers? What do you mentioned the Bad Cat? Is that kind of the primary amplifier that you rely on, or what do you?
Yeah. So what I've been using since very early on, I started using the Bad Cat, the Lynx model, which is basically their high. I got it initially because I loved the gain channel on it. That's kind of like their highest gain one. But actually having Dave Barry, actually, that was his rig for a very long time, and he used it with the effects loop and the high gain channel, and it sounded amazing. But Dave, he has the most incredible tone. But for me, even though the high gain stuff is great, I didn't, for my rig and my guitars, it didn't work as much. But the clean tone is one of the purest. Again, similar to, I don't like anything that doesn't sound right, and I call it healthy. Just like there's no weird frequencies. It doesn't sound modern. It doesn't sound like there's circuitry going on there. And I think because the design is so simple, where there's a giant power transformer, no EQ. There's literally just a volume and a tone click rotary switch with 5 clicks. I think that contributes to the fact that you just plug it in and it sounds like your guitar. Very beautiful, very vintage. You would totally think that it's a old Fender amp, but it's very, very pure sounding. But even though it's the power tubes are EL34s and it's class A, so it's not exactly a Fender's design, but
Sure.
just a very classic tone. And then I can just get whatever I want from it. And I use the Bad Cat. I have a bunch of cabs that we mic. We have a ribbon mic and a dynamic mic on it, and I have the aux box behind me.
Yeah.
We actually used in the studio a bunch because we track the stuff that goes on sale on iTunes for the voice one day out of the week. That's basically like a different setup. So initially the engineers they saw it, and we recorded Henson Studios, which is an amazing studio.
Oh yeah.
So there's no need for an aux box, but they just really liked it still. You know, in the beginning they didn't know what it was, but then they like being able to click between channels. So both Dave and I use that a bunch. I still need to use it again. I have a little ISO room here, so it's just as easy for me to throw a mic on a cab. All my heads are here and it's mic'd up in the other room. So but I do like it. The aux sounds killer. And all that stuff. Right now I'm working on my own album, so for some stuff, the Kemper and plugins for like really punchy stuff. Sometimes,
okay,
if you're not trying to go for super organic sound, that could work as well. But
have you compared many of the other cabinet simulations and load boxes to the aux, or just that one?
I have a little bit actually. There's something else I use, which is the what is it called? The Fire amplifier. You know that one?
Yeah.
And I actually have one of those too, and it sounds really nice too. I saw that one because I saw the Satchel from Steel Panther uses that. That's his rig on Steel Panther. And by the way, I love him. I think if you checked out his playing, he's an insane guitar player.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, it's just the auspices of the band are sort of unusual, but I think
I know, but it's funny that I went to see them live a bunch of times, and I didn't realize I never checked out their albums, and I don't know, every time you see them like on YouTube and stuff, and then I just clicked them on Spotify. I remember, and I started listening. I think it was a couple of years ago, and their music is actually brilliant. I've been playing it to all my friends because Satchel Russ, I forget his last name. He was like I think roommates with Paul Gilbert or something, and he used to play in a band with Rob Halford called Fight, and they have an album War of Words, which is a masterpiece rock album. Everyone should check it out. Fight, and he's literally on that level, like one of those 80s shredders, but very, very musical, and he's an amazing songwriter as well. The lyrics are ridiculous and hilarious, so it limits the commercial appeal, but I enjoy them. So I saw his rig live is just going in from his guitar to the wireless to the amplifier to the PA, and for a lot of the flight gigs I got that one. And again, it's a good thing. Sorry,
you just do that. You just use the amplifier.
So I haven't. I did only a handful of shows. But then I just went back to using the deluxe. The main reason I'm really, really frightful of hurting my ears. Like I survived so many years in the industry, and thank God. I think like I have my ears tested periodically, and they survived,
Right.
Like the audiologist said, there are a few little dips. It looks like a teenager who listens to earbuds a little too loudly, but all the frequencies are there. And that's something crazy that people don't talk about enough. To me, it's volume is really once you change your attitude towards volume and you realize it's something that can actually just take away from you the thing you love most, because I loved volume as well. You crank because you want a good sound, but that sound is actually hurting your ears, and then you're not going to be able to hear that sound.
Right.
If there's one thing out of this whole crazy conversation we're having, I'm saying so many things. The one thing to take away is to, protect your ears, is because that's one of the only things in the body that doesn't heal or there's no regrowth of hairs, cilia, whatever it's called. So volume is really not, you have to be very careful with volumes. You can have stuff loud, but just have earplugs. And if you have in-ears, don't crank them. That's something I used to do when I was younger, because you all those, Backstreet Boys, all those high pressure situations where the crowd, it's a 40,000 person crowd, and they're screaming so hard, and I'm the only one starting a song. So I have to hear the click track counting off in my ears. and all the video, everything, the pyro, everything is going to go on sync with that. So, and I'm the only one playing for the first bar, you know, of you know. Anyway,
right.
I forgot Billy. Which, by the way, I'm playing. I always play that wrong. That riff. You know, I want it that way. I think it's with a capo. Yeah, because I think it's with a capo. That's the right way to play it, with a capo, but I played it without a capo because I needed to do all the electric stuff afterwards.
Right.
So I went out of tune, but that's the way I did it. And I changed one note. That's the nuance. It's supposed to be, and I did. It's supposed to be, and I go, like I changed. I used the 5 instead of the 3 to make it a little, what I call safe. You know, no one ever noticed it because those notes sound almost the same, but it's like little compromise that you have to do to make it work when you're the only guitar player. But you know, I'd want to make sure if I miss one of the clicks in the beginning, I'm going to mess up the whole night of the shows. And it really, it's the same exact thing on The Voice. You know, so many songs start with just me on guitar. You know, whoever's in the lead guitar spot. Right. Every song almost starts with either an acoustic or electric or piano intro by itself. Every song we play, and it doesn't get any easier. You know, because you're at the mercy of your hands, and it's live television. So you want to make sure you hear the click track if something happens, and so you tend to crank it a little bit too much, but that can also is not great for your ears. So I learned pretty early on also to turn down my pack, you know, and it's still there, but it's not blazing at you. You can still kind of look for it. But anyone watching, definitely think of volume not as a fun thing. Think of it as something that can take away your joy from enjoying sound. Everything we talk about is sound, you know, and hearing the nuances between phasers and compressors and stuff like that. You need to have your ears for that. So definitely you don't need to go loud. There's no reason also, you know, especially with things like aux, or at least put something in a different room or have it turning away from you, or put a baffle, have little musicians' earplugs. Even if you have your own, even if you're playing in a band that doesn't have in-ears, there are ways now you can do it. If I was starting now gigging, I would get my own in-ears. Even if you can't afford the custom ones, you can just put generic ones, and you can even have it go to a little mixer that only you're controlling, and put a condenser mic next to you, and you're just basically hearing what you would hear anyway, but you're controlling it, because it's really, really crucial to protect your hearing. So why did we talk about volume, voice?
Yeah, we talked about that. The other thing I wanted to sort of finish on is about sort of what you think the pivot is for musicians now. And maybe go into that a little bit about, you know, there's no tours going on. It looks like The Voice is trying, from what I understand, is trying to figure out a way to make future seasons perhaps happen, or at least this following season or this coming season happen all remotely. What do you think is the move for session guys, sidemen, people that are doing television? What do you think that this is going to look like, or what's your kind of prediction?
Yeah, it's tricky, because I've been in many ways, I've always having had the fortune of being consistently working, you know, in the industry for 17 years. I still, every year seems nuts to me that I'm doing it, and seems quite frightening. You know, like sometimes I say, I can't believe that this is my job, because there's no job security, and it's very dramatic. Basically, every time you get a gig that's a major artist or a touring gig or a TV show, you feel it's not like getting a regular job. You feel like you literally, like you won the lottery, you know. And I had a musician friend say once, it's funny because musicians, you're either unemployed if you're not, by definition, if you're not on a gig, and then you go from being unemployed, you get a gig, and you're treated like royalty. You're taken around the world. You have catering and stuff. So it's so drastic, the difference. And my friend said, you either talk to a musician when he's depressed because he's unemployed, or he's ecstatic because he just had free catering. And like those are the two ends of the spectrum. And so my approach to the music industry is, to begin with, is you can't expect it. It's not like a normal industry anyway, or there's a lot of stability. The example I always use is, if any other job, you know, if you're a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer or a plumber, every single city in the world needs a bunch of them because they need someone to come work on their house or to check them up. But the entire world only needs one Katy Perry or Lady Gaga, or all of America has one voice and American Idol. It's like imagine if there was literally two doctors that could have a job in the whole country, and people are going to med school. So it's not. That's definitely the way it is for major gigs, because there are really only a handful of gigs that pay a substantial salary, and major artists. And a lot of these people work with the same people for years. The Voice has had. I was basically the newest guy to get into Paul Mirkovich, our boss on The Voice, in 30 years, and I've been with him now for 8 years almost. But it's not like there's a lot of openings. Jesse McCartney, the other artist I work with, we've been together for 17 years, and I have a bunch of people that come in and sub for me because I do a lot of musical direction. Even, by the way, Matteo Sasato, I actually got him the Tori Kelly gig. I called Musicians Institute when he was there, and I asked for recommendations from Musicians Institute and UCLA because I was looking for players to come audition. But those opportunities, there are not a lot of them just because you don't need that many artists, because you have YouTube and that's something people really need to internalize and think about, because it's a numbers game, and so for me, I always say, music is absolutely the most beautiful, fun, awesome thing in the world and makes life worth living. But your attitude shouldn't be that you have to. It owes you a living. That it needs to provide you a living. I never felt that way, and I remember I used to see different singer-songwriters and people that perform all the time trying to make it, and they would push and they'd keep doing gigs and stuff. And I said, maybe just people don't want to hear your stuff. Like, it's a weird stance to have. Not only am I going to make art, which is it's the most fun thing to me. Playing guitar is my favorite thing to do in the world, other than being a dad to my kids. So it's cool enough that I get to play it. But then to say, not only am I going to do this, people need to pay me to do the most awesome thing in the world. That's a very greedy thing, to think about. And a lot of people do think that way. They not only want to play music, they want to be famous and successful and have that. And you should look at that, the fun component, as worth money as well, because the most successful lawyer would be making over $1 million a year. The most successful guitar players are not making that much, but They could. But you should calculate, $300,000 worth of fun by getting to do what you want. So by definition, you're going to be paid less, at this field, because my father-in-law always says the problem with the music industry is for every job there are 1,000 people lined out the door who would literally do it for free. Mm-hmm. When I started doing it, I remember my best friend in Israel, he said, "Why are they paying you? You would do it for free." And at the time I would do it for free. But now, as you get older, there's certain things, there's certain skills that you acquire just through experience, like the big part of the hardest thing about the voice, the two things, is learning stuff very quickly, playing them authentically, but also emotionally and psychologically being able to handle the crazy pressure, and knowing that even if you feel very scared, which we all do at certain moments, you can power through it. And the only way to gain that confidence is just through years and years of being through these situations. In the beginning, you're terrified, when you're younger, you do things and you survive it, and you gain a little bit more confidence. So for those things, that you get paid because there aren't that many people who can do it, but if you want to be a touring guy or session guy, it's labels are able to pay a lot less to musicians just because people would agree to do it. So I'm not saying not to do it. It's awesome, but make sure if you're getting into the music industry, really be honest with yourself about the reason you're doing it. Because I know, for instance, with my kids, I think I definitely want them to be artists and musicians and play music. It doesn't mean that their career has to be as a musician. You can do that. The musician part of me is going to be there regardless of the current gig I'm doing, because I'm always practicing and doing all that stuff. So first of all, you need to make a distinction between playing music for the love of it and having it be your livelihood. And sometimes, you can have it do both. but it doesn't have to be, and there's nothing wrong with giving it your all and also having something else, having as a doctor or whatever you want, as a graphic designer, and do other cool things, or a chef, or but as far as the future of the industry, I really can't say. I'm at a point in my career where I've been trying for a long time not to tour anyway. It took me a very long time, only basically getting married and having kids. Finally, I was able to to really commit to not going on the road, and then I was fortunate to start doing The Voice, and that kept me in town. And then I do one-offs, but for the most part, I'm here in LA either in The Voice or in my studio. But so what's going on now hasn't directly impacted, even though I did have a lot of shows, all the one-offs, everything, of course, got wiped out completely. And even stuff we're not, hopefully the Pink, will be able to do shows soon, because I know she always has an amazing tours planned. And like everyone, it's going to be hard to resume that. So everything, whether directly or indirectly, affects myself, even if I'm not primarily a touring guy. But to me, what's interesting is, as a songwriter, because I do songwriting and production, music for TV and stuff, that's also going to be a lot more competitive, because people are home now and everyone is discovering there's no tours, so I need to compose, I need to record, and people are going to put a ton of great energy and talent into that field as well. So that's going to be more difficult to break into and more competitive. So I can't really say about the financial aspect of it. I can say that I think the level of musicianship and music is actually going up for the first time, I think, for a long time, because I was one of these people that always liked older stuff, and grew up in the 90s, but I only listened to Stevie Wonder and Yes and Rush and that kind of stuff. But I never liked what was relevant, and definitely not in 2010s. But now there's actually really good music, and I feel like it's because a lot of kids now, that on YouTube, they're not just learning how to play guitar, they're learning how to produce and how to mix and how to get tones. And if someone just even remotely is interested in finding out about vintage tones and the qualities of vintage art, they just go and they check out all the Led Zeppelin live shows and AC/DC, and it's very easy to reinvent yourself and to basically time travel through YouTube, and we're seeing the effects of that. You see some brilliant new players and great music that I actually listen to, not because anyone's forcing me or because I have to learn it. Dua Lipa, for instance, she's one of the big. Do you know her stuff?
Yeah, I do.
And you listen to the stuff, it sounds amazing. It sounds, that stuff, that it's the most mainstream pop, but it just sonically it sounds so good. The guy's producing it, Andrew Watt, he's one of the biggest producers. I don't know if you know him. He did the new Ozzy Osbourne album, and he's a brilliant producer, guitar player, who also was like a metal kid, and now he's doing pop music. But there's really great stuff, and there are people that are making a lot of money in that field. But I feel like if I had to give some advice, I would say to people, really, the only possible way to break through the noise is to try to do something that's somewhat original, because really there's going to be versions. If you see people on Instagram playing gospel, all the R&B stuff, which again, I remember the first time I discovered it, I couldn't. Jarius Mosey and players like that were amazing. Tim Stewart, Joe. There's another guy from San Francisco. I forget. I think Jobu. Jubu. Sorry. He was like the first. The people were talking about him, and I couldn't even find. I just heard about it, but I could not. Still to this day, now I'm sure there's stuff, but I remember Jarius Mosey and Tim Stewart were the two that got me on that. To see that at least, and I don't really play that a lot. I can steal a few licks, but now there are tons of kids on Instagram that do that stuff out of context, though. It doesn't have, to me, if it's not within the context of a song, not because it's something kids don't want to hear, because you're young, you just want to solo and shred and stuff like that and play cool things, and people tell you, oh, but what about the song? And you're like, oh, this is grown-ups bumming me out, telling me what, like, homework.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really true. We lose perspective when we grow up as guitar players. We're just focused on the 1% that to us is our whole existence, and it's still, and that's great. It's a great thing to obsess over delay pedals and phasers, and I love that, and it really makes a difference too. Even within the context of the voice and stuff, you really hear that stuff. But you have to also remember that you're serving I hate saying it because it's something people say and it sounds annoying, like what a grown-up would say, but you're serving a song, and
Yeah.
to me, it's very hard to play when it's not in a song, because how are you even going to solo if you don't know what the story of the song is?
Right.
And I think that's good advice. That's always going to be the vehicle if you want to succeed in any shape or form in the industry, even if it's as a session guy. You're not going to get called for session now because people are not doing sessions. People are able to play themselves and fix it in Logic or Pro Tools or Ableton. So you have to force yourself, whatever you do, you play, shred, do all that stuff, but force yourself to write a musical piece to put it into. By the way, Matteo Sosato, that's one of the reasons he's so successful. He's able to incorporate all his techniques to write mini compositions for Instagram, and people, he has, I forget if it's 1 million or 500,000 followers on Instagram. It's not all guitar players. It's people that enjoy the beauty of guitar.
Sure.
Because he's playing beautiful music. So that's the biggest advice I give. Do all that stuff, but try to frame it to trick the listener, like put a Trojan horse, like make a nice song or a piece of music and hide your chops in there. And you'll realize, even if it feels like a little bit of a chore in the beginning, you'll get it that's really all that matters at the end of the day. Because all the music we love, everyone I mentioned, Slash, all my favorite players, Tom Morello, all these people, we love them first and foremost because they have riffs and amazing songs that we love. That's the vehicle. And then they add all their stuff onto it. So I would say don't play music, don't noodle, don't do that stuff. Try to make everything take the form of something that's consumable for regular, because that's the only way you stand a chance to actually have something. And then you could make money, because you can find your audience that loves it, and then you can go do a clinic or you can go do smaller shows, but you're playing it yourself, so you can get all the money and compensate for the smaller budgets, but you're getting it yourself. So there are ways to still make money, but you definitely have to have something of value, and not to blame. A lot of people blame the industry and the world for their lack of success. And I think it's very important to be honest and look at yourself. Like, I always blame myself for everything that goes wrong, because I prefer that way, because then it gives me a feeling of control instead of feeling helpless. I say, well, even this goes back to when I got Justin to come with me to the audition. I remember I thought, if he gets the audition, a gig instead of me, it's because he's just better than me, or he looks better than me, or I didn't practice enough, or he knew how to interact with the artist. It's just, and that's something I need to work on. I'm not going to try to hide people from the industry. You know what I mean? And it gives me a lot of peace of mind, because basically, if I don't succeed or I don't do something, it means I need to work harder or refocus my attention, versus just feeling like the world is wronging you because you want to play guitar and you want everyone to pay you to play guitar because you want to be a star. It just doesn't work that way,
Right.
And most of the people that succeed don't have that mindset. They really have a very humble mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was, I think that's a good place for us to complete today. We did 2 hours and 28 minutes.
Yeah. It's so funny. Yeah. And again, this feels a lot like, if it's not something that I'm talking about with my friends, it's the kind of stuff that I think about all day long, and it's so.
Yeah, me too. I think that what I appreciate about the conversation today is that you've clearly spent a lot of time kind of developing and honing the choices that you make, and that's musically, that's sonically, in terms of the equipment and the gear that you choose. And I think that there's a lot of wisdom for people that are, let's say you're in the unique position, in the frightening position of saying graduating from MI right now, right? You just graduated 2 weeks ago or whatever it was for them, and they want to be doing what you're doing. Certainly, if there were such thing as any sort of cookbook recipe to get to doing what you're doing, that's all been obliterated. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in the things that you're saying, and I think that I think that there's a pivot here that people can explore, and I think that I agree with you. I think that the level of musicianship and creativity and just the growth that we're seeing already in this short amount of time is certainly attributable to people having to sort of stay home, focus on the things that they love musically, and figure out how to get them either to the internet or to production. And a lot of that's going to require them to absorb some skills maybe they didn't have before. And you're going to see new ways of doing things that we never thought were possible, or we didn't know they were possible. Then, so I'm excited to see what some of those changes look like, even though it was born of necessity and
and even aside from the COVID thing, I feel like a lot of those trends are mostly attributable to YouTube, and I feel like I just see it. I've kind of seen a wave that I wasn't aware of, but you definitely see a big kind of the new. There was a time where they were saying the new rock, guitar or distortion pedal, like we had when I had when I was younger. Now then it became like a synthesizer. There was a time where it was like dubstep music, so it was massive. There was a plug-in Massive by Native Instruments.
Right.
That became the rock guitar. Now a lot of people are really getting into production, and that is the ultimate, because first of all, the tools are cheap. You buy Apple Logic for $200 and you're done. That's all you need, and then you can invest any extra money in a few choice analog pedals. Like you can get. I always, by the way, since I was a kid, I used to plug in something analog before I go to the computer. So if you're using Amp Farm or I mean, not Amp Farm, the Logic stuff, or you can use the Helix Native or whatever, a Guitar Rig, the computer is going to do most of the work digitally, but why not also add some extra warmth before? There's no reason not to do it. So before you go into the interface, I can show you that's something that's useful. We'll finish, but I have a separate rig. When I'm writing, I'm going straight to the computer. But you see there's a little pedal board here. It's hard to see. It's always engaged, and it has a few just boost pedals. It has the Schaefer Replica, that Mesa Tone Burst, and the Friedman, the Buxom Boost.
Okay.
So before I hit the computer, just to give myself a little bit more juice to help the computer out, And so if you have a laptop, an Apple Logic, and you get one, you get the Vertex Boost, one like a nice compressor, just something to kind of make you more robust when you go into the computer. That's literally all you need to compete. You see Billie Eilish, you see all these great artists. You're on the same level playing field, and you're actually not burdened like I am with having, to mortgages and kids and all that stuff. You're actually a kid. You can just sit on YouTube all day long and learn guitar and learn keys and learn drums and learn voice and learn how to produce. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing. They used to say that. I remember seeing the documentary about Dr. Dre, and I think it was about NWA, and they said that Dr. Dre, they saw right away because he was producing the beats. I forget if they said something like I forget if they said bankable or something like that, because it's rap. There are a lot of people that rap, but he was actually creating a product that can travel the world. He was creating the full song, programming on the MPC. And that's what's worth money in the industry, because playing is great, but again, and I've said before, but I'll stress it again, and something that's worth money is a file, an MP3 or a file that you can send people. They can license it to stuff. They can send it to their friends, and their friends follow you. That's what's worth money. Playing guitar is not worth money. You can stream, you can do stuff like that, but the beauty of it is that the playing aspect is completely transferable to the MP3. So make sure you spend the time learning about audio and recording, and it's going to clarify. And it's also going to make you a much better player, because instead of thinking you're right, you're completely confronted by how you really sound, because you're recording and you listen back to yourself all the time, and you're just really living in this zone of reality, And if you can make it sound good on a recording, then it'll sound good everywhere else. So that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Dory, I sincerely appreciate your time and your willingness to be able to contribute and give some great tips and advice. And I really look forward to seeing you when we're allowed to do so in some form of normalcy over at the showroom or wherever when I'm in LA. So I look forward to that, and thank you again for your time.
I would love to, and thanks for staying on me, because I know it's it was hard to make plans, and then the whole COVID thing hit. So I'm really excited, and thanks for because again, I love doing this stuff. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to checking out all your pedals as well.
Yeah, me too. I'd love to get your feedback.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool, man. Great. Thank you so much.
So that was Dory Lobel. That was a great conversation, a long one, but a great one. I totally lost track of time. In fact, I just love kind of hearing his stories, and there's some parallels in really a lot of these coming to LA stories. Even, his good friend Justin Derrico, who kind of introduced us. He was coming from Virginia, certainly not as far as Israel, but everybody kind of makes their way in some way or another in LA, and both these guys are really hard workers and have that in common, and I can see why they've been so successful in the business and just making great music. And certainly appreciative to Dory for getting into those stories, sharing his gear with us, sharing some of his favorite pieces. That was a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, I want to give a quick shout out to everybody that makes this podcast possible behind the scenes. Hunter Harrison for mixing and editing the podcast, Mason Mejia for co-producing the podcast, and Tim Marco for creating all of the background music. Until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. See ya.